right now at a press conference, but we are expecting a full complement of the City Council today. Council members Gruhl, Hahn, Huizar, Labange, Rosendahl, and Weiss. If you'll make your way to Council chambers as soon as possible, we will begin the meeting. Thank you. I'd like to reiterate a second quorum call for Council members Gruhl, Hahn, Huizar, Labange, Rosendahl, and Weiss. If they would please make their way to Council chambers as soon as possible, if their staffs would assist us in that matter. We are waiting 2 more members to begin our meeting. Thank you. Again, I want to thank the council members that are here, Councilmember Cardenas, Parks, Perry, Reyes, Smith, Wesson, and Zine. I've instructed the Sergeant-at-Arms to go retrieve 2 members from the Mayor's press room, so hopefully we will start shortly. Thank you. now have 9 members, and we have a 10th. All right, Mr. Clerk, please call the roll. Nope. Thought we had a 10th. Council members Gruhl, Hahn, Weezer, Labange, and Rosendahl, we are waiting one more. I expect the Sergeant-at-Arms to bring them in at any moment. Mr. Clerk, please call the roll.
Cardenas, Gruhl, Hahn, Weezer, Labange, Parks, Perry, Reyes, Rosendahl, Smith, Weiss, Westenstein, Garcetti, 10 members present and a quorum, Mr. President.
First order of business, please.
Approval of the minutes.
Mr. Zine moves and Mr. Smith seconds. If there's no objection, so ordered.
Commendatory resolutions for approval.
Mr. Rosendahl moves and Ms. Perry seconds if there's no objection. So
Mr.
ordered.
President, do you wish to take public comment at this time?
Yes, let's go ahead and take public comment first. We'll begin here in council chambers with Noel Weiss. After that will be Melrose Larry Green. Good morning.
Okay, public comment. Good morning, council members. Again, I wanted to just thank Mr. Wesson and also Mr. Reyes yesterday for having that hearing, the joint hearing before Plum on the tenant relocation monies. It was a little disconcerting because nobody really came out and said whether or not the $9,000 and $17,000 that the Planning Commission approved and that the Housing Department recommended is okay. Now, it's going to be 3 weeks. People on television should understand that 3 weeks is going to come back, but the hope is it was properly vetted. We should be able basically to hopefully get that done, but I have given to the clerk, and it will be passed around, my analysis and my evaluation as to why 9 and 17 should work, why it's appropriate. Hopefully, the members of the council will take a look at it between now and a couple weeks from now, and maybe one member of the council can come out in favor of the 9 and 17, but the bottom line is here, you're all progressive Democrats, not all, but most of you are progressive Democrats. You're supposedly for the little guy. Hopefully we can be in a position to get these approved and somebody out front can say that they're for. Thank you, Mr. Garcetti. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Weiss. Mr. Green, dressed in orange.
Good morning. Yes, I am dressed in orange, and pardon my appearance, but I jogged down here. I'm running in the marathon next month, and I figured I'd use my time management skills. Took the train over here, bus, ran. I'll run home. The reason why I'm here this morning is to let you know that tomorrow night I'm off to Las Vegas, where I'm going to be seeing a great concert. It's Chuck Berry, Little Richard, Bo Diddley, Jerry Lee Lewis, Booker T and the MGs, Mary Wilson. I know these are all acts that you love, Tom Labange. And I was over at the Florentine Gardens last week talking to Kenny McKenzie. And thanks to you at the City Council, you saved the Florentine Gardens. And it's quite likely we're going to have Chuck Berry at the Florentine Gardens. I wanted you to be the first to know, you at the LA City Council. And we're not going to have any free tickets, but you'll be welcome to come backstage and meet Chuck. What better place than the Florentine Gardens, than Hollywood Boulevard? We spend so much money in the city of LA, and no offense to the rest of you 15, but my Councilman Labange and my neighbor Councilman Garcetti in the 13th and the 4th reversed order have done an incredible job. And those of you that have not been to Hollywood lately, go to Hollywood, spend time there, spend money there. And I know it's not easy always to do what you're doing over there, but you're doing the right thing. And I think 42nd Street in New York is a little bit jealous of what you, Eric, have done for Hollywood Boulevard. Anyway, I'm off to Vegas tomorrow. I'm not gambling, but let's have a great meeting. And I know it's contentious. It's not always easy to get things done here in the city. And I'll see you all at the marathon. Thank you. I'm Melrose Larry Green. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Green. Sylvia Hawkins is our next speaker.
Thank you.
As we continue part 2 from yesterday, of these churches are also faking name tags on their clergy jackets and clothes, as though they are priests and bishops from state to state. Please, all hospitals, public people, private people, don't allow them in your room, visiting in any mental ward. All must stop at this time because of all of these people, after visiting you, are going back to the nursing station and commanding them to put their loved ones on higher doses and milligrams of medication without the patient or doctor agreement. These are the fake family members illegally in United States, 58 states. As I saw for myself in a mental hospital, helter-skelter. I have no idea how he got out of the jail cell, but I saw him for myself. Again, what is going on in mental ward with patients, with workers, janitors, guards, and cooks. We must be very cautious of sex that is going on in mental wards, hospital, jail cells illegally. Again, it is illegal for patients to get out of jail cells, whether it's helter-skelter, whether it is Bob Marley, or whomever is doing time in jail. I want to know a question: who allowed these criminals to get out of jail cells and now in different locations? I want to know who controlled the jail cell key. Thank you very much. My name is Ms. Hawkins.
Thank you, Ms. Hawkins. Our next speaker is Bruce Darien out in the San Fernando Valley.
Council, President Garcetti, I've spoken a number of times on the public fraud line that the city has initiated, how it's in conflict with the False Claims Act, the Federal False Claims Act. Congress many years ago found that even the Attorney General of the United States at times could circumvent the act by colluding with the what would be defendants or the people that are the culprits to the fraud, depending on whether they were large defense contractors or who was involved. The state of California has colluded with the defendants and the people that are the parties that are responsible for the fraud under the False Claims Act in thwarting a proper investigation in the Malibu Pier debacle. Several people that are on this city council have been involved in the state legislature while this is going on and while it continues to go on. The Malibu Pier is one of the largest corrupt acts and public contracting fiascos in the state, and it involves the federal interests. I've talked for many months now over it. It's been a cover-up by Bill Lockyer, the Attorney General. There's been more than 300 lawyers, 50 law firms. It's been a Hollywood media blackout over this contracting fiasco, and it's no surprise that your police station now is being built by a one-bid contractor. It's not surprising at all. There's a mechanism here, and it's well crafted and well hidden. But it's time the public comes together, rallies behind it, and requests true investigations here. I think that the fraud hotline is nothing more than a mechanism that the city can sift out information to work with the people that are involved and get them out of harm's way and being prosecuted for their wrong acts. I don't see it as a legitimate process. The False Claims Act is an important law that should be looked at by the public and used more often. It's been used rarely by the public, and it needs to be used in the public for prosecuting fraud, people that are ripping off the government's coffers. That's about all I have to say now. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Darien. Our next speaker is Oscar Johnson. Mr. Johnson?
Good morning, City Councilman. My name is Oscar Johnson. I'm an activist for the homeless on Skid Row, downtown Los Angeles. I think the homeless is very neglected through this government, and our government is getting far too much money or funds to neglect the homeless and don't spend enough money on the homeless. And there's children living in hotels downtown that is illegal, that we have laws against child endangerment, living in a hotel under a certain age, and our police department is ridiculous. They only stigma of people of color. We need more job opportunity. We need more work to bring some dignity to our people and job training, and especially for our homeless and our youth. We need more Boys and Girls Club to develop in the city so they can have more positive things to do with their time. But there are so many things I want to say about what need to be did in L.A., and so much is being neglected about our streets and sidewalks need cleaning and repair all over the city. I keep getting promises from the mayor's office, but promises are never been fulfilled. But I hope that the mayor and the city heads think I'm not coming down here and wasting my time for nothing and running my mouth to hear myself talk. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much, Mr. Johnson. Our next speaker, there's no name on this card. Is there somebody who lives at 11927 Magnolia? Oh, Chuck Tenen. Go on. It's okay. I'll fill it out for you. You got it, Chuck.
Forgive me. Chuck Tenen, Valley Village. First of all, I'd like to thank Ed Reyes and Herb Wesson, Eric Garcetti, Wendy Gruhl, and Bill Rosendahl. And if I missed anyone, on their hard work on the housing issues. And under the leadership of Jane Usher, President of the Planning Commission, who recently unanimously moved the relocation assistance to $9,000 and $17,500 for your vote to reflect market rates of 2007. The LA Times now says that the average rent in LA is $1,550. In 1987, when rents were $400, you could get a year in a relocation transition. Now in 2007, you'd get a month transition. Well, that's not too good, so passing this 9 and 17 and the ordinances will not solve the problems, but will minimize them and close the gap to protect the people that it affects, and that's the tenants. And infrastructures go hand in hand with housing. Regulations, sewers, traffic congestion mitigations, substandard streets, storm drains, cumulative environmental impacts that affect an entire neighborhood. So the clarification of demolitions and permits and track maps should not be approved until all infrastructures, and I mean all, are identified and approved and dealt with. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Tenen. Candido Maris will be our next speaker.
Good morning, Mr. President, council members. Announcement, I know you all know about this, but the public doesn't. This year, the City of Los Angeles will take a historic step in an effort to clean up the city. We will join Keep America Beautiful and start our own campaign, Keep LA Beautiful. So, Mr. President, council members, thank you very much. Mr. Mayor, we appreciate this. This is something that a lot of us who are out in the community every weekend trying to clean up our districts really appreciate and will look forward to doing. I would ask, though, that each and every one of you invite those in your districts to come to this event. It's going to be held March 3rd. It's going to be on the steps of City Hall. Kickoff is at 8 p.m. And lunch will be served at 2 o'clock. Again, Mr. President, council members, Mayor, thank you very much for bringing this to the City of Los Angeles.
Thank you. Our next speaker will be Louis Neville, or Neville. Louis Neville. Okay. Tom Peterson.
The name is Patterson.
I'm sorry,
Good
Mr.
morning.
Patterson. Thank you.
Representing the Valley Village Residents Association. With respect to the public hearing that was held, the joint public hearing on housing and the rent ordinance issues, I think it requires a separate hearing to put it on an agenda that has 14 or 15 items compromises due process. There were many people who were not given an opportunity to speak for their 1 minute yesterday. The hall was full. The overflow crowd filled all the perimeter around the room. There was obviously great interest in the issue, and it should have been scheduled as a separate hearing. And I hope in the future, when you have an issue that's that controversial and that complex, that you will recognize the need for the public to participate in the process and allow enough time. With respect to that meeting yesterday, there was a significant issue that was glossed over. Mr. Garcetti, you directed a question to the city attorney to in effect say, what happens to the projects that are in process when this ordinance finally becomes law? We've been screwing around with this ordinance and this issue for years. The problem is now. The problem is to be dealt with by your ordinance in the future. The response from the city attorney was projects for which an application has been deemed complete, in effect, would be grandfathered from the provisions of this ordinance. That's a major concern to all of these people that showed up yesterday who are impacted by all of these projects pending demolition or conversion. In Valley Village alone, within 1.5 mile radius of the Orange Line station, there are
Thank you,
119
sir.
units facing demolition for 500 condos.
Thank you, sir. We appreciate your comments. That closes our general public comment for today. We've heard that we can't respond directly in public comment because it hasn't been agendized, but thank you for those comments, and I'm sure folks will be in touch. We're going to now run through the agenda, colleagues, if you bring your attention to... Oh, and just before that, I'm sorry, Ms. Gruhl had a very special introduction. Ms. Gruhl.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Two things I wanted to. One is I want to introduce from the Downtown Magnet for many of the students who are here, if they could stand. It is Job Shadow Day at City Hall. They are seniors in the Academy of Finance. We have Mike, so let's give them a great round of applause. Micah Hazagawa, Student Body President, Kevin So, Senior Class President, Yemily Montoya, Michael Pereira, Diana Marquez, and Steve Gill. Thank you very, very much for being here. We hope to see you here in City Hall employed one day after you graduate from the Downtown Magnet. So thank you very much for being here. And my second introduction is with, just to let you all know, one of my extraordinary staff members is moving on to her next job, and she is not unfamiliar. Come on, Rosalind, don't be shy. Rosalind Wayman, who many of you know, who was the first head of Dunn, worked for Cindy Misikowski, has been an active person in the city of Los Angeles, is taking a new job to work for Supervisor Antonovich. She's been with me for over 4 years. I won't say it's been a grueling experience, but it's been, she works very hard, and we talk morning, noon, and night. And so I just wanted to acknowledge her. She didn't want me to do this, but I wanted to acknowledge Rosalind Wayman. Thank you very, very much. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. President.
Okay, Mr. Clerk, next order of business.
Items 1 through 6 are street lighting district items, notice for public hearing.
Okay, anybody wishing to call those special, colleagues? Seeing none, let's take those together. Please prepare the roll and tabulate the vote.
13 ayes.
Okay, next items, please.
Item 7 is a variance appeal notice for public hearing. The matter was continued in the Plum Committee, and I believe there's a request to withdraw that matter and send it back to the Plum Committee.
Okay, this is item number 7. If there's no objection to that, that will be sent back to Plum, withdrawn from council. All right, so ordered. Next items, please.
Item 8 is a conditional use and variance appeal notice for public hearing, and the applicant requests a continuance to February 20th.
Okay, if there's no objection, colleagues, we'll continue that till February 20th. Next items.
Items 9 through 27 are items for which public hearings have been held. On item 19, the applicant has requested a continuance to February 7th.
Okay, if there's no objection to that, I'm sorry, could you restate that one more time, Mr.?
That was on item 19. The applicant is requesting a
19.
continuance
Okay, if
1
there's no
week.
objection, colleagues, we'll continue to 19. Next items?
You're still on the remainder of the items in that section.
Okay. Any specials, colleagues, 9 through 27? Mr. Reyes, 26 and 27?
Yes, I have a verbal amendment for items 26.
Okay.
Essentially, that the council is the first directive that the council instructs staff to amend the reciprocal easement agreement to the satisfaction of the CLA and the city attorney prior to execution, so that if the city-owned portion of the project is reduced in size, then the city's proportionate share of the shared maintenance costs, including insurance premiums and deductibles, will be reallocated as provided in section 1.3 of the purchase agreement. And number 2, that the funding agreement be returned to the agency board for confirmation based on potential change in the scope of the development due to funding issues, all of which occurred subsequent to the action of January 18, 2007.
Okay. There's no objection to that. We'll accept
And we'll have that in writing for you.
as a friendly amendment. I'm sure our great city clerk caught each word of that. So,
Mr. President, I understand there's going to be amendments also on items 23 and 24.
Yes, we're going to hold those on the desk. But on 26, 27, you're good with that as it is? Okay.
Yes.
All right, so no special, so we'll accept those. Yes, Ms. Gruhl and then Mr. Parks?
Thank you. If I could call item 21 special and ask for the public hearing. I think we have three or four cards if we could. I know.
Okay, there's no objection. We'll do that. Mr. Parks?
On 18, that we move both reports.
18, Mr. Parks moves both reports. Okay. And I will call number 12 special. Any other specials, colleagues? If not, let me just congratulate Mr. Reyes in advance on 26 and 27. I know you poured a lot of hard work into that project. Please open the roll, close the roll, and tabulate the vote.
13 ayes.
Those are approved. Next items, please.
Items 28 through 39 are items in which public hearings have not been held. 10 votes are required for consideration.
Okay. Colleagues, any specials? We do have some cards from the public.
You have cards on 31 and 34.
Okay. For the other ones, we will open and close the public hearings. Other specials, Mr. Zine, and then Mr. Parks? Okay, Mr. Parks?
First of all, I'd like to ask 13 forthwith and also 32 special. And if we can ask to have it heard out of order, we have a police officer and family members on that.
Okay. If there's no objection, colleagues, to taking 32 out of order when we get through the agenda, we'll start with that one, and 13, if there's no objection, we'll send forthwith. Any other specials? Seeing none, let's open the roll on the balance, close the roll, and tabulate the vote.
13 ayes.
Those are approved. Next items, please.
On the continuation agenda, items 40 and 41 are items for which public hearings have not been held. 10 votes are required for consideration, and there are cards on both those items.
Okay, let's call 40 special, please. And we will also call 41 special for cards from the public. Okay? Next items?
That would take you back to items called special, and I believe you would take item 32 out of order.
Okay. Mr. Parks, there's no objection to Mr. Parks taking 32 out of order, and then we'll go from there.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to ask Detective McClanahan to come up. She's going to be accompanied by Andrea Davis and Elizabeth Wright, who are family members of our homicide victim. I spoke to the family members. They may not want to speak, but we wanted them to be present. We're going to ask the detective to give the information regarding this homicide and also the renewal of the reward. So.
I'm Detective McClanahan, Homicide 77 Division. I'm here on behalf of Anthony Fountain. He was a 17-year-old Crenshaw High student. He was on his way to school walking on the west sidewalk of 8th Avenue. He was approached by unknown suspects who jumped out of a car, shot him twice in the head. That happened on May 15th. As of today, I have no suspects, no witnesses, no one will come forth. But at that time, there was a female driving down the street who witnessed the incident. As of today, I have no idea where she is, and I'm hoping that the reward will have her contact me at area code 213-485-1385.
Say that one more time, a little more slowly.
I'm sorry,
Say that number.
213-485-1385. And hopefully this reward she'll come forward to help us solve the homicide of Anthony Fountain.
Thank you very much, and I want to thank the family members for being here. We know it's a very, very tough situation, and again, ask the public for their support. Anyone that was a witness to this incident or has information, we would certainly like to ensure that Detective McClanahan gets this information at 485-1385 at 77th Homicide. Thank you very much for coming down.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Parks. Please prepare the roll on this, Madam Clerk, and tabulate the vote.
13 ayes.
That is approved, and if there's no objection, we'll send that forthwith. Thank you. Ms. Gruhl asked for 21 as well, if we want to move that now.
Thank you.
Ms. Gruhl, go ahead.
If we could just have the public hearing, and I know I have city staff then answer some questions I have after that. Thank you.
How long do you want? 2 minutes to a speaker? Okay.
Yes, that'd be great.
So Noel Weiss will be our first speaker, and then Tom Patterson. Excuse me. Oh, and before you start, just the city attorney is going to say something. Go ahead, Mr. City Attorney.
And this is a reminder, council members, this is a fair hearing matter requiring council members' attention to the speaker or your monitor.
Thank you for that. Mr. Labange and other council members, this is a fair hearing matter, so if we can ask everybody to please make sure, Ms. Hahn as well. Hold on one second before you
Thank you,
start.
Mr. Garcetti. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Can the sergeants at arms just assist in making sure the council members are in their seats?
Thank you, Mr. Labange. Hi, Mr. Smith.
Okay, please.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to get your full attention here on this very important matter. We're making history today, ladies and gentlemen. I want the people viewing and the people in council to know and understand what we're doing today precisely. What are we doing and why? We are taking, I think for the first time in I don't know about the city's history, but recent history, tenant mitigation conditions. We're taking those tenant mitigation conditions, we're separating them out from the track map conditions, and we're recording them separately. Now, the reason why we were able to do that effectively is through the leadership, I believe, of Jane Usher and the Planning Commission, and also Mr. Sheffel, the developer, should be congratulated here because he basically volunteered these conditions. But the point that the council needs to understand and the public needs to understand is that it's doable. Taking these tenant mitigations and separating them out is doable. We haven't done it. The tenants have been hurt because of it. The middle class has been hurt because of it. And now I just want this to be an example to everybody. In fact, even at the last Plum meeting, we had an issue involving Mr. Weiss, and even he solved the problem by saying, well, let's try to protect the tenants by separating these out. Now, where are we left? First of all, since I don't have a lot of time, basically, where are we left? We need to close the circle. We don't want to have another Lincoln Place. What caused Lincoln Place? The developer made a bait and switch. They made a promise, a no eviction promise to this council. Then they flipped the property. The net result was those no eviction promises went by the wayside. The way we prevent that from happening is if Mr. Sheffel decides to flip the property, if for some reason this doesn't happen, the city itself should be empowered to enforce the condition. I'm asking Ms. Gruhl as part of our appeal, since basically what will happen is I think this is a situation where they'll all respect what you want to do because that's the way it works and that's fine. But I'm asking Ms. Gruhl, in addition to what we've asked for, that the city basically be authorized to record the tenant mitigation conditions in the event Mr. Sheffel himself fails to do so for whatever reason. If we can do that, we can complete the circle and we will have moved a mountain here with regard to protecting the tenants, protecting the people, and I'm asking you to help us, help you, help the people. And that's basically what this is all about. There are other considerations here. Unfortunately, I'm out of time,
Thank you, Mr.
but
Weiss.
it's in writing.
Appreciate it. Thank you. Tom Patterson. After that will be Lloyd Pilchin.
Tom Patterson, the Valley Village Residents Association. A San Francisco case was decided in February that says, in effect, that the city council may impose mitigation conditions that are not in conflict with the Ellis Act as long as they are not unreasonable. The mitigation increase amount proposed in the ordinance yesterday and suggested initially by Mr. Weiss and adopted by the Planning Commission are not unreasonable because they're based on a relationship to the loss of rent-controlled affordable housing and the current market rate for replacement rental housing. I would like to ask that this matter really be continued and sent back to Plum for one very good reason. There are a number of issues that were not properly addressed in the MND, and Chuck Tenen will speak to the infrastructure issue. In the MND, the city planning department said there was no impact from storm drain issues. Mr. Tenen will address that. The more important issue is that under the California Track Map Act, you as a legislative body may reject this application or refer it back to Plum because the application does not meet one of the mandates, which is that the project must be in compliance with the general plan. The Valley Village specific plan is part of the general plan, and there's been no determination to date that the project as proposed complies with the specific plan, and therefore it does not comply with the general plan. So on that basis, I would ask that the matter be referred back or not be considered until such time as there is a determination that the project as proposed complies with the Valley Village specific plan and therefore the general plan. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Patterson. Lloyd Pilchin.
Good morning, honorable council members. My name is Lloyd Pilchin. I'm with Jeffer Mangels, Butler and Marlboro, representing the applicant and owner. We support the recommendation of the Plum Committee last week. The recommendation reflects the owners volunteering to record a covenant that the appellant sought. All other issues in this case, the entire case has been thoroughly vetted. The City Planning Commission unanimously upheld the advisory agency approval. There was also a hearing at the Plum Committee. We support their recommendation. Regarding any additional tenant benefits, the owner volunteered conditions that are reflected in the determination, condition number 15. These conditions go above and beyond what the municipal code requires. Any changes that the appellants now seek to create additional tenant benefits, these must be adopted legislatively so that they affect all projects and so that it's predictable. The owner no longer agrees to any further benefits. Again, we support the Plum recommendation with no further changes. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Chuck Tenon?
Good morning, council members. Chuck Tenon, Valley Village. Something that was overlooked, a very important issue, hydrology, storm drains. It was not included or addressed in documents that were submitted to city planning that were critical to this appeal. There is insufficient infrastructure criteria that was not met to determine a cumulative environmental impact to the area of this proposed development. The failure of the city to address the storm drain issue that was submitted by Tom Patterson to city planning regarding this trap map approval. This submission was not addressed by planning or anyone. Therefore, the mitigation declaration is defective. You can't approve something that's not complete. It was ignored. I'd like the city attorney to give their opinion and their ruling if the failure to incorporate into an MND that was critical and it was mitigation requirements that should have been met. And what was overlooked is standard urban stormwater mitigation plans. Project categories were not addressed. The Regional Water Control Board requires new development and redevelopment projects to incorporate stormwater mitigation measures effective September 2002. Depends on the type of projects. There's two kinds: standard urban stormwater mitigation plan or site-specific mitigation plan. And the categories: housing developments of 10 or more units. And there's a redevelopment definition that talks about if you replace 5,000 square feet of existing, well, guess what? And you replace something, then you have to put this mitigation down on the MND, and it was not. It was not addressed, and it should have been. So you can't approve this until it is. And I would ask the city attorney to give their input on this if a measure that should have been required was overlooked. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Tenon. That closes our public comment, our public hearing, and we'll return to Ms. Gruhl.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. If I could have staff come forward. Just a couple of questions, and you've obviously heard the speakers today, and I want to thank all of the speakers who have been very active, not only on this project, but on other projects in my district, in making sure that we are supporting tenant relocation, supporting the fact we don't want to have too much overdevelopment, what's allowed in the specific plan, et cetera. So the couple of questions I'd like you to respond to is, one, the compliance with the specific plan that was mentioned by Tom. Additionally, on the recording tenant mitigations, I know the Lincoln Place issue, we had a big discussion during that time of whether or not we could record it or not, and the advice of the city attorney at that time was that we could not. It's my understanding the owner has agreed to do that voluntarily. So that would be and then the two other questions that were asked was one about the MND and the infrastructure that was brought up by Chuck Tenon. I know that I've been concerned about, if you have just one project, you're like, doesn't, make as much difference as it does as you suddenly have 20, 30 projects on a street, particularly for us on Magnolia, that we've looked at how you look at traffic as transportation issues as well as that. But if you could respond to his question. And then lastly, my understanding is that the last day to act on this is today. Is that correct? It says that in the agenda, the last day.
Yes, correct.
is January 31st. Okay. So if you could, and just hold my time, Mr. President, if you could answer those questions that were raised by the speakers.
Michael LeGrand, Acting Chief Zoning Administrator, Department of City Planning, along with staff, Deputy Advisory Agency, and Maya Zazevsky, who act on the case before you. Some of the issues that were raised, the applicant in this case, this is not a condo conversion, as you know, this is new construction. There are rent-controlled units that would be demolished as part of this development. The developer for this project took the step to volunteer conditions to add for some tenant mitigation measures that are outside of the normal conditions that we have placed on projects. Being that these are voluntary conditions, I believe there needs to be some discussion with the applicant on agreeing to further conditions this project. I understand the concerns raised by the appellant in terms of the recording of the covenant and agreement, but the applicant has acted in good faith on this project and negotiated, I believe, in a fair manner with the tenants and with all the parties involved, and included the planning department in terms of looking at mitigation measures for the tenants that help their concerns in terms of the timing of evictions or any relocations, the amount of relocation and subsidy that would be provided to them. In terms of recording the covenant, we'd have to have a discussion with our city attorney if that is something that the city can impose itself if the applicant doesn't record it. But since this was a volunteer condition agreed to and is a condition of approval, I do believe that if there wasn't compliance with the condition, we do have police powers that we can invoke to seek compliance. Whether at this point, if we could require the recording of that covenant, I really don't have an answer for you on that. I think we need to entertain legal advice, but I do feel the applicant has acted in good faith to make these conditions something that works for them and works for the tenants. So I think the appellants are asking for an extra level of security I'm not sure that the city can actually impose, but I don't feel that it's necessarily required in this incident with the developer's good faith that we've seen so far. In terms of the mitigation measures, this was brought up to us early on, and we addressed this at all levels of the appeal. The process itself, the development process, has safeguards for things like storm drains, water runoff, hydrology, and those technical reports come at the development process during the issuance of building permits. All of those reports and studies will be looked at and conducted with the Bureau of Engineering, Department of Building and Safety through our experts in the city family. And so the environmental, there's no significant impact from this development on those resources. Therefore, they're not mentioned in the MND, consistent with other projects. In terms of if they're worried that this is going to have drainage issues or hydrology, we have laws in place that protect that. There's technical studies required of this development before any building permits will be issued. So your constituents and your communities are safeguarded when a development goes through, that the departments that will review those technical reports will do that before they issue a building permit, just as they would for a by-right apartment project, for example. Those same studies and analysis will be conducted. And this project identified no significant impacts in terms of the resources that were mentioned by the appellants, and we feel the M&D is strong on this case and provides a safeguard for the development, and any issues that were raised have been mitigated to a level of insignificance. In terms of the specific plan, this project is a tract map that's allowing for the sale of condominiums. There's no issues in terms of the specific plan that we saw that prohibits this project from going forward. They will be required to go through an administrative process with our community planners to review that it's in compliance with the specific plan. And if anything comes up that they're not in compliance, they would have to get a specific plan exception in order to be in compliance. But staff hasn't identified any issues that are inconsistent with the specific plan for Valley Village, and any further discretionary actions that would be required for the plan are still available to the city. And so if this project was found to be out of compliance, which we don't feel it is, they still have to come in for a project permit under the specific plan. So this entitlement in no way grants them any rights to deviate from the specific plan.
Yeah, I just wanted to say a little bit more about the hydrology issues. We do have, I think, 10 or 11 hydrology mitigation measures. They have to do stormwater retention on site and comply with best management practices. And then Bureau of Engineering also conditioned it for hydraulic calculations. So they're aware of the problems in the valley with drainage issues, and during the B permit process, they need to submit hydrology and hydraulic calculations and drainage plans for review. So these issues have been covered.
And the only other issue I'd like to ask is on relocation, because there's been some concern and issues. And I have asked the owner, and I will do that again publicly to his representative, that as we were discussing in the meeting yesterday and that the Planning Commission adopted, I believe this council is going to increase the relocation benefits in the very, very, very near future. And in good faith effort, I would ask him to consider that. He's been, again, on some of the mitigation. Consider that as we move forward to those tenants. Brian Zolan, who's one of the tenants who is here today. I think that, colleagues, this is, as we debate and wring our hands and try to figure out how to deal with not only relocation, but particularly in my district, it's not as much condo conversion and what people think about. It is demolition, as you were mentioning, and affordable units, and so many of my constituents who are being displaced. And what we've tried to do is work on not only relocation benefits, but also timing-wise and assistance in that area. On the, I heard you, because I know Mr. Weiss was concerned particularly about the mitigation items, recording those tenant mitigations, but you believe we have enough powers right now. I am interested in the future, because that debate did occur on Lincoln Place by the city attorney for them, and again, at that time, they indicated to us that we could not do that. So I'm pleased we're able to have this in a voluntary way, but I'm still anxious to have, as part of our larger discussion on condo conversions and demolition that result in a loss of affordable housing, that recording issue be resolved and further reviewed in that item. And I know, again, not only Mr. Tenen, Mr. Weiss, Mr. Patterson, and our tenants are going to watch as we look at whether or not it complies with the specific plan. And I count on that. I hope you will. You live there, you know that. We had an instance this week. We did a press conference on one in which the neighbors brought to our attention some things that Building and Safety either may or may not have seen, but it was the community. And so again, I know I don't have to challenge you to do that, because you will make sure that we are on top of that, and to keep in touch both with Maya, Michael, and of course Dale Thrush on my staff as we move this forward. So again, I thank the commission because they did get that. I thank the owner. He didn't do everything I wanted, but I would like him to reconsider the relocation benefits item and to adopt the Plum report, with the understanding that we will watch closely on the specific plan on those things that related to the sewers, as well as those tenant mitigations that they agreed to voluntarily. So would ask that we then adopt the Plum report. And thank you, colleagues, for letting us have a public hearing. I think it was very important to have on record exactly what had been agreed to and what we want to see in the future on that site. Thank you very much, Mr. President.
Thank you very much, Ms. Gruhl. With that, let's please open the roll, close the roll, and tabulate the vote.
14 ayes.
Okay, that is approved. And we have a request from Ms. Hahn and Mr. Rosendahl. Take 40 out of order. Mr. Parks?
Could we get 18 forthwith?
Yes, if there's no objection, we'll send 18 forthwith. And so with that, I'd like to recognize Ms. Hahn and item number 40.
Colleagues, I stand today here in partnership with certainly my colleague Bill Rosendahl, and hopefully the majority of you, certainly Council President Eric Garcetti and our leadership team of Wendy Gruhl and Jan Perry. What we have before us today, I think, is a good move for us. What we're doing today is rescinding the original living wage ordinance and reintroducing an ordinance that will instruct the city attorney to draft something that is significantly different from our original living wage ordinance that was passed last November. But I will tell you, for me, what was important during all of this was that we preserve the living wage for the hotel workers along the Century Boulevard corridor, and we have done that. And while I think recent polling on both sides have shown that we would have prevailed at the ballot if we had gone in May, which I think that should be of great credit, importance, and encouragement to the workers, that I do believe the people of Los Angeles would have stood on your side and would have believed that you deserved a fair, decent living wage for the hard work that you do. But I think it was a consensus that no one wanted to have an ugly campaign that would divide the city. No one wanted to spend taxpayer dollars to put this on the ballot in May. So we have been working diligently around the clock in negotiations to try to come to an agreement that we think will honor the workers, respect the workers, give them the dignity they deserve, but also address some of the business concerns that were brought forth since we passed this ordinance last November. What we are instructing the city attorney to do today is to, again, write something that's substantially different, but that will require the hotels to pay a living wage to its workers. This living wage will be phased in several phases until July 1st, so they will get a living wage in July 1st. It will create an airport hospitality enhancement zone, which will allow us as a city to focus our efforts on improving the business climate for the corridor. We want to do things like expand our investments in this zone. We want to have workforce training programs. We want to do marketing. We want to commit to studying the possibility and creating a mini conference center. It's something we've talked about for a long time, but a mini conference center in that part of Los Angeles would create about 35,000 hotel bookings annually, and we know that we lose a lot of that business to smaller cities like Burbank and Glendale and Long Beach, so this is a good move. And it will do something that the business community really cared about, and that was a quarantine language. This ordinance, the new one, will apply directly to the corridor. It will apply directly to these hotels along the corridor. And it will set up a process that if we ever want to expand the living wage again, we will have to go through a very specific process. And we have agreed to study this after a certain time to see the impact that's had on it. But I want to thank everyone who really stayed at the table and negotiated this agreement. I really do also want to thank the hotel workers, because I think for you it's been kind of a in limbo process since we passed this in November, and you weren't really sure whether or not you would get the living wage that you deserve. And so I want to thank you for continuing to be good, honest, hardworking employees during this time. But you should know that there were a lot of us who never wanted to give up the idea that you deserved a living wage for the work that you do, and we never gave up our belief and admiration for the work that you do and for the role that you play in the entire hospitality industry for Los Angeles. So I want to thank you, and I want to tell you that you will get your living wage in full this year, and that was important to me. But I also believe the business community will receive benefits that I think long-term will be good for all of us. So I want to thank everyone, particularly my colleague Bill Rosendahl, for standing firm and bringing us here today.
Thank you, Mr. Rosendahl.
Mr. President, first I want to thank Janice Hahn. And folks, when Janice Hahn and Bill Rosendahl are determined to do something, you all need to stand up and be counted. Thank you, Janice, for your tremendous leadership. I want to thank Maria Elena de Rosa, who's sitting right there in the audience there, for her leadership. I want to thank David Fleming and the Chamber for their leadership in getting together. This is a win-win situation. Our mayor, as usual, has showed incredible skills. The mayor, the president of the city council, and the pro temp of the council worked feverishly with our offices to come up with a compromise that made sense for everybody. It's a win-win-win. First, it's a win to the taxpayers. We don't have to spend $3 to $5 million to put something on the ballot. Secondly, we don't have to fight among ourselves, spend a lot of money fighting against ourselves and creating division in this great city. We don't need to do that. We have rescinded our initial motion, and we have substantially changed it. We've changed it in the following ways. Number one, the living wage will go in place, but it will be phased in. An initial step effective with the publication of this ordinance. A second step reaching the full living wage effective by July 1, 2007. And a third step, the first annual living wage cost of a living adjustment effective January 1, 2008. We commit the city to employ enhanced and expanded city investments and incentives in the Airport Hospitality Enhancement Zone. Now, what I like about this, folks, this is real. What it says is we're going to make a zone there with the Century Corridor, and we're going to put all of the energy as a great city into that zone so that that becomes a destination place. It becomes a model for the future. We're going to build a conference center, and that came from the business community. That came from the Hilton Hotel, from Grant Cooley about 3 years ago. When we have a conference center there, people can come to those hotels, walk along a nice street that will be beautiful, and go to a conference center, do their meetings, get back on the plane, and get out of town. So this will become a destination point. It is codified in this motion that we will do that. So what we now have is a great opportunity for all boats to rise together. The workers with dignity and respect, they need dignity and respect, and they need a living wage, because that's what dignity is all about, living wages for people. And when workers are taken care of and appreciated by their employers, the customers can feel it as they come into the hotel, where they can feel the energy of the workers feeling positive and good. That helps business. So it's good for the business community to look themselves in the mirror every morning and say, I'm paying my workers a living wage. They don't have to have a second job and a third job. My job here is good enough, and I'm going to pay them enough so they get their fair share. So when you add that up and you put in a zone that actually will create opportunities, and you get a conference center, everybody wins. I am just delighted, and that's why Janice and I put this motion forward, and we look to your unanimous support. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Mr. Rosendahl. Our next speaker is Ms. Gruhl.
Thank you, Mr. President. And I think that as we sign this motion at the top, it says under the motion, partners in progress. And I think that is very apropos of what we're doing today. And it was a wonderful day, a great day in Los Angeles that we heard not only from the labor unions and the hotel workers and our colleagues, but the business community as well, to move forward in Los Angeles. And as many of you know, all of us are very supportive of being a strong business community, but we also feel to be a responsible government that we need to be both business-friendly and worker-friendly, because creating jobs and having workers who have less absenteeism, who also are more motivated to be able to be part of that and to not leave that location. Job retention is critical, and this helps. Today's motion in rescinding and asking the city attorney to instruct to draft a new ordinance reaffirms our commitment to pay these workers who do so much for our community a living wage, while clarifying our intent that there is language about a process in the future. And we worked very, very hard, all of us, Bill and Janice and Eric Garcetti and many of the council members who we spoke to morning, noon, and night about how to make sure that we look to try to find a balance and a win-win situation. And I think that is what we have done today in this item. And so I'm proud of my colleagues. I'm proud of Maria Elena Durazo and everyone from her team, James, who, again, we sat through a lot of meetings together and shuttled diplomacy between rooms to try to work this out. But the best thing is the people of Los Angeles benefit today from this historic agreement and moving forward. So thank you, and again to the leadership of our president of the council as well, and the mayor, and a special thank you, although he is not here, hopefully listening, is Tom Sines from the mayor's office, who did an extraordinary effort of advocating and doing all the fine points to make it a reality. Thank you very much, Mr. President.
Thank you very much, Ms. Gruhl. Mr. Smith.
Thank you, Mr. President. If I could have the city attorney come forward, please. I have a couple questions, and hold my time while they're coming forward. Hold my time, please, while they're coming forward. Thank you. You know, I drove in this morning hearing that we had a great deal, that everybody was going to be happy with this, that this is really an opportunity to make the industry happy, make the people happy, make the workers happy. And I got here and I read this deal and I said, I don't see it. I really, honestly, God, don't see it. So let me ask you, City Attorney, the couple questions. First of all, my colleagues have said the word substantially different a couple times in their presentation. As I read this, I don't see any substantial difference, quite frankly. In the original ordinance, we had a living wage requirement. In this motion, do we not have a living wage requirement that's the same thing? It's just phased in over time. Is that substantially different, that element?
Teresa, Assistant City Attorney Teresa Stamus. Councilmember, we believe the law does require that these, or that we would be in a better position if this new legislation was challenged. The more different that the new legislation is, the better position we would be in litigation. Whether or not this is substantially different is a question of fact for a court. We do see here significantly different elements than were in the original ordinance, including the overlay zone, the economic enhancements.
Well, I'm going to get to that in a minute. I asked you specifically this one question. I'm going to go down through all these.
Okay.
On the first element, living wage ordinance, required in the old ordinance, required in the new, just with a phase in. That's not a substantial difference, is it?
That's a significant difference from the new one, but again, that's ultimately that would be a question of fact for a court if it
I
were
understand,
challenged.
and I'm going to use my old friend Hal Burnson's comment again. I think it's the brilliant comment of the decade. When you go to court, you're guaranteed one thing. It's not justice or fairness, it's an answer.
Right.
We're going to get an answer in court. We hope we don't have to go to court.
Right.
So the question to you is, our city attorney, as you would defend this in court, how can you say that the language here is substantially different? At the end of the day, over just a period of time, it accomplishes the exact same thing. That's not substantial difference.
Well, what a court will do in evaluating that question is look at is to look at whether or not the new ordinances addresses the objections that were raised to the first objection. And what I recall from the council, from the record in council and also at committee, that some of the objection was that it was requiring a commitment of an investment by the hotels in paying workers more without a corresponding investment by the city. There were other concerns about training and other things that the city was supposed to assist in making happen.
Let's get into that. You didn't answer the first question, but we'll get into this one then.
Right.
Okay? It says here, and I'll use the words, it's right here, it says it will explore zone enhancements. Doesn't say we're going to do them, we're going to explore it. 6 months from now, the council could say, yeah, we looked at it, can't do it, right? There's no guarantee. There's no guarantee, right? It says explore.
True. The court's going to look at the entire ordinance and determine whether it addresses the concerns that were raised and led to the petition.
Okay. Second one is it's going to say examined economic impact. Doesn't say we're going to do anything. It says we're going to look at it. What's substantial about that? We're going to examine it. There's no action. There's no action in exploring enhancements. There's no action in examining economic impact. It says we're going to study health care, and then we're going to consider forced contributions. 4 things are different, and not one of them is an action plan. How is that substantially different?
Well, first of all, this creates a platform for the city to make good on all of these commitments. And when we come back with an ordinance, it may create an opportunity to fine-tune some points that would enhance the ordinance so that it would, sustain or withstand any legal challenge. But as we see it, and again, we were just handed this motion this morning. What we see are some very different elements that were not present in the first ordinance. Certainly, there's a risk of litigation, and ultimately, a court is going to be the decision maker.
When you make an offer to make a change, shouldn't there be some sort of guarantees that there's going to be a change? because there's no guarantees in this motion that anything changes. There's an old Jewish statement, I think it's said at the Seder in Passover. It says, what is different about this night than any other night? What is different about this ordinance is we're going to look at a bunch of stuff, but there's no guarantees we're going to do anything. Ladies and gentlemen, you know, the council got us in this mess, and now you're trying to wiggle out of it with smoke and mirrors. As I look at this, all you've done is make a bunch of promises with no guarantees, and you've enforced a living wage ordinance just as you did before, and you're doing it again. And as far as I'm concerned, as I look at this, you know, I'm going to vote to get rid of the ordinance because that's what I pledged to do in the first place. But to go back to do the second ordinance based on this motion does absolutely nothing but give us back the same thing you gave us in the first ordinance with a bunch of pledges that we might do things, we're going to look at things, we're going to consider things. This, unfortunately, is a bait and switch of the decade.
Mr. Reyes?
Thank you, Council President. I understand the passion that we hear in my colleague's voice as he articulates his doubt in this institution, because that's what we have before us. It's a commitment written through a motion that talks about a different environment and how we treat not only businesses but people. So the collective effort that has been shown by our leadership should not be in any way minimized because we don't have an action plan in place at the moment. What we should be talking about is how we work collectively with our respective communities, with respective committees, in coming to a point where we can deliver what we're writing here in this motion. Now, it's taken us several weeks to get to this point. I applaud the leadership that's already been identified. But more importantly, we're saying to the city that everyone matters. That even though you're a janitor, even though you are the one that cleans up every room, whether you're the person who owns the building, or you're the person that manages the funds, and the income of each of those roles vary enormously, we're saying that you matter, and we're saying in this motion that we're putting all the pieces in place to deal with these differences, with these inadequacies and these injustices that exist when a single parent has to work 2 jobs because they're not being paid enough to meet the needs of their children, to feed them and have a roof over their head. For some of you, you might roll your eyes and say, here we go again with a liberal diatribe. Why don't you say that to the kids who are right now living in cars because they can't afford to live in a room? Because their parents are working 2 or 3 jobs because they're being paid $6, $7 an hour. So therein lies our goal as a council. What kind of city are we going to have? And this motion talks about a real effort. We don't have guarantees. We will get to them, I believe, because of the commitment that's been demonstrated by the chairpersons of each committee who wants to see one city develop in a healthy manner for everyone, regardless if you're a janitor or a business owner. So a las personas que están aquí, gracias por su paciencia. Sabemos que estamos en una lucha muy difícil, pero yo creo que con el apoyo de ustedes, siguiendo con los elegidos, vamos a hacer una diferencia para todos. So I've just said, so in English I'm just saying, I want to thank them for their patience, for their support, that between the elected officials and their hard work will continue to make a difference, and I look forward to a yes vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Reyes. Mr. Zine.
Thank you, Mr. President. I was listening to the news this morning driving in. They talked about the middle class of America in Los Angeles. Middle class, you're now $100,000 to $200,000. That's the middle class. $100,000 to $200,000 a year annual income is the middle class. $50,000 isn't the middle class. $30,000 isn't the middle class. We're talking about people who are minimum wage employees. And my heart goes out to what you have to endure and try to make ends meet. And I understand what Mr. Reyes' concerns are, also Mr. Smith. We represent a San Fernando Valley where people are struggling, just as they are in other parts of the city of Los Angeles, with the high cost of living in this city. It's outrageous what people have to pay for rent, for houses, and for everything else in the city of Los Angeles. But that's economics, and that's what we have to live under. But when I hear about this ordinance, when I hear about what we're trying to accomplish, and I see the workers here, and then I hear about litigation, when I hear about court, when I hear about the thousands of dollars that were spent on the petitions, and when I hear about the polling that's taken place, we're talking about as human beings that we're trying to do something for to help out in their opportunity to live in the city of the angels. That's what we're really talking about. So when I hear the court and the city attorney and the litigation, we're not getting into that arena of litigation. We're trying to do something to help people, not to hurt people, and not to drag this out through the courts. I didn't support putting this on the ballot for a variety of reasons, the cost of the taxpayers. That was my main concern, to go to that cost. And I appreciate what Council President Garcetti and the mayor's office has done, Wendy Gruhl, and others who were involved in the backdoor, and I shouldn't say the backdoor dealings, but the negotiations that were taking place, because that's basically what's taking place as we continue this every single day. I'd like to hear someone from the Chamber of Commerce, because I got a couple calls this morning that said the Chamber was supporting this. They were supporting this movement forward. And I'd like to hear, I know we've heard from the City Attorney's Office, I'd like to hear from the Chamber of Commerce or the representative to say, yes, we're moving down the right path. We're moving down a direction that we want to follow so we can bring conclusion to this. And I ask, is there anyone in this chamber from the Chamber of Commerce or any representatives here? I was not at the news conference this morning, but is there anyone here who could speak on behalf of the Chamber of Commerce that I understand is supporting this new direction, which I want to join my colleagues in supporting to help the people out, but I'd like to hear from the other side, because we've heard from the Deputy City Attorney, the Assistant City Attorney, we've heard from colleagues, but what about the business that we're talking about? Is there anyone in this chamber who can speak on behalf of those businesses to say, yes, it's a good idea, we're getting close, and we'd like to move forward with this? Can anyone say they are here for that purpose?
I think they were here, Mr. Zine. If you'd like, we can give you David Fleming's cell phone. He spoke at the press conference this morning, and I think because they participated in that, they did not attend the hearing this morning.
Because I did try to contact the president of the executive director of the chamber on his cell phone. It was unavailable. But I just want assurance that we're not going to do something and end up, for the workers, end up in court and drag this on for 5 or 10 years, but we can come to conclusion, we can come to satisfaction, so we can join in hands and say we're accomplishing something and not just getting it tied up. Because I guarantee you folks, once it gets tied up in court, it's going to get tied up in court for a long time, and no one's going to benefit except the attorneys that are going to deal with the court. So, which is what's going to traditionally happen when we get into litigation. And prior to this point, we never talked about litigation. We never talked about a challenge. We talked about doing something for the workers and whether it was going to go or not. So I support the movement forward, and as we draft another ordinance, and I see a convention center that's part of this, which wasn't part of the original, and I see the empowerment zone, which was not part of the original, so people could actually come to Los Angeles International Airport, land, and attend a conference, not have to travel downtown and fight traffic to go to the Staples Center or to the convention center, but they could have a conference close to the airport, then get back on the airplane and fly back out, and turn that into something other than hotels along Century Boulevard, so it could benefit the community that has a wonderful climate represented by Rio Rosendahl, who's talking to Mr. Garcetti to try and make sure that we're still on the same page. So as I understand now, we've got one motion going forward to say we're going to pull it off the ballot, and then we're going to move forward with another ordinance. And if we have a stumbling block of that ordinance, my question is, do they then go back and get more petitions? Do they go out and spend $800,000 again? Or do we find solution and cause without going to court and tying this up in litigation, which again will not benefit the workers that are looking for a reasonable increase in their compensation, which is not going to put you in the middle class of society whatsoever if you're looking at what they're talking about as an increase.
And thank you, Mr. Zine.
Can someone answer that question?
Yeah.
Please.
And I'll maybe ask the city attorney, Tom Sines, who is here from the mayor's office.
Where is he? Tom, can you come forward and explain that, please? Or address that, answer that question? Because I don't know if we need to separate, but have it as one motion or to separate it into two motions. I just want to make sure we don't get tied up in litigation for the benefit of the workers that we're trying to solve something for.
Wait, Teresa Stamus of the City Attorney's Office. I think your question was about logistically what happens if you were to repeal the ordinance and then reached a stumbling block when the new ordinance was presented to council. Is that your question?
Yes, and then you mentioned something about litigation, if this goes to litigation. We're trying to keep it out of litigation.
Right. If you mean by stumbling block that a new ordinance isn't enacted, then there's no new ordinance on the books.
Then what happens? Does the
Well-
initiative come in and it'll go back on the ballot, or what happens?
No, you lose the authority to put the initiative on the ballot after today.
Then what happens to the $800,000 they spent for the petitions that were
Well,
signed and validated?
it was repealed by the council, so the
The
legislation
ordinance
is
is
gonna-
repealed, okay. But we're not putting anything else, we're talking about putting something else. So what guarantee is for the workers, what guarantee is for the hotels that we're going to come up with something versus nothing? That's my question.
And then, Mr. Zine, you'll have to push your button again because we're over.
Okay, just an answer to that, that's all I need to find out. And then I'll be joining Janice, Han, Bill, and everybody else. Thank you
Okay.
very much.
Mr.
Just
Sines?
answer my question.
There is a motion that includes a new ordinance that would be enacted that is substantially different from the previous, but still includes protections for the workers at the airport hotels. So that is what would take the place of the repealed ordinance. What the referendum, the collection of the signatures accomplish, is the repeal of the ordinance. So instead of an election, that ordinance is being repealed, and there will be a new and substantially different ordinance enacted that will address the same area, but in a different way, but does include the core principle of protecting the rights of the workers at the airport hotels.
And the hotels buy into that?
I'm sorry?
The hotels buy into that? The hotels accept that?
The hotels were a part of that discussion, and as we go forward, it is my belief that many of those hotels will agree that this is a way to go.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Zine. Mr. Weisar, followed by Mr. Parks and Mr. Garcetti.
Thank you very much. I'm happy to see the common ground that was found here, and I want to applaud everyone who made this happen. I know it takes a lot of work. A few weeks ago, I went to support 12 workers at one of the hotels in Century Boulevard who may have lost their jobs because of change of ownership in one of the hotels. And I was very happy to see the owner of the hotel come out and talk about how supportive he is of the move to provide a living wage and health benefits to the workers at his hotel. He recognized the importance there is and the benefit there is to owners of hotels when they invest in their workforce, when they have a happy workforce, when they have morale very high in that workforce that wants to work with management to get things done. I wish we could have seen that with all the parties involved initially so we wouldn't be here today. But that person reminded me that it's possible to continue to prosper, to continue to provide the beds at Century Boulevard, continue to provide an area there that attracts people from around the world to stay, and at the same time have a quality workforce that is respected, paid a living wage, and given benefits. It's possible. So I was kind of surprised when we went through this process where we were hitting up against the wall, where it wasn't possible. We had to put up a fight to do it. But I'm very happy to see now that we're finally moving forward with common ground. I wanted to thank everyone involved, particularly Janice, and who actually almost got beat up once over there, right? But and everyone involved in this. But particularly I wanted to thank the workers, because it was your efforts, era su esfuerzo y lo que ustedes hacen para venir aquí, para decirnos y recordarnos que aunque estamos en una nación que es la más prosperosa del mundo, todavía tenemos que asegurar que todas las personas aquí beneficien de esta nación, que es una de las mejores en todo el mundo, que todos beneficien de lo que tiene a ofrecer aquí. I wanted to finally mention that when I went out and I spent almost half a night with my colleague Ed Reyes in jail, getting arrested on Century Boulevard and supporting these workers, and possibly risking my bar status as a member of the California State Bar. I did it because I strongly believe that those who need support and a voice, we should all be standing up for them, because they, along with us, are in the same boat in the long term. Muchísimas gracias. Adelante. Gracias.
Mr. Parks, and then followed by Mr. Garcetti, and then we do have speaker cards and are required to have a public hearing on this item.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd just like to continue Mr. Zine's questions and ask, because I couldn't get a definitive answer, was that if the new ordinance is passed and the hotels sue the city of L.A., and the judge agrees with them, does that nullify the second ordinance?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. The other issue is that although we've said, many people have said hotels are on board, Mr. Sines, I think your comment was, I believe that some of the hotels will sign off, and that's a little less definitive. So do we know they're going to sign off, or we're speculating, or what?
We know what the interests of the hotels are. We know what was under discussion with them. Many of the new elements of the ordinance that's being proposed actually came from a proposal from the hotels. So our expectation is that those hotels will sign on. I think that those hotels have indicated they want to see specific language of an ordinance, but I believe the concepts that are going to be in the ordinance, and we will be working with the city attorney's office as well as the council members to make sure that the elements that are in this motion are incorporated, and those are the elements that the hotels were seeking, or many of them were seeking.
Okay. Let me ask the city attorney, does the hotels have two options? If the second ordinance is passed, they have an option to sue whether it's really substantially different, or they have an option to go back on another referendum, or can they do both?
Right. If the new ordinance is put into place, it doesn't avert the fact that there may be a plaintiff out there who may file a lawsuit. It doesn't have to be, the hotels. It could be, any third party.
So any third party could sue. So the issue is we could be here a month from now with the same issue, either a referendum or a lawsuit.
Well, the important part, and what is going to be important litigation, is that the objections to this ordinance came from the hotels, and the motion that directs the city attorney to draft this new ordinance seeks to address the issues that gave cause for the objections to the original ordinance. So presumably, it is, it's extremely compelling and helpful that the hotels are in support of this motion.
Okay. Let me ask, it appeared that the reason they did the referendum was that they were opposed to the living wage, and that's still a part of this. So have they pretty well decided they're no longer opposed to the living wage?
Well, do you want me to take it?
I think that there were a number of reasons that they were opposed. Many of them are incorporated into the elements of this motion. When we sat down with the hotels and the Hotel Association, there was an understanding that an agreement would include a living wage. So that objection was to be compensated, if you will, by some of the other elements that are included in the ordinance to be drafted by the city attorney.
Then are we to assume the fact that we're repealing it and they're not here saying they support the repeal and we're going to move forward, is that we didn't come to a conclusion, we didn't come to an agreement with all the negotiations?
As I mentioned, I think that the hotels are waiting to look at the ordinance to see if the elements that they were most interested in are incorporated in a way that they like into the municipal code. I think that these elements reflect what the hotels were interested in, and I don't want to say all of them. There were exceptions, but these are the elements that many of the hotels were interested in and wanted to see incorporated in an agreement. They are not prepared, it is my understanding, to sign off until they see the language that's going to be codified as a part of city law.
Okay. Was it resolved, the issue of the tip workers? Has that been resolved, or is that still a hanging issue?
One of the elements of the motion is that the council would commit to have a study completed within 6 months, within a year, to evaluate the living wage, and one specific element that the study will be required to look at is the structure between tipped employees and non-tipped employees. Historically, the city has not treated those tipped versus non-tipped employees differently under its living wage laws, and specifically this study will look at that issue.
Okay, so that's what, item F?
That's correct. That's right.
Okay. Colleagues, I just want to go through, I went back and looked at some of my notes from when this item came before, and one of the things I just wanted to say that today, and one of the big issues was whether we're going to unnecessarily spend city general fund money to go to a referendum, and the other whether we'd be subjected to a divisive campaign. By repealing this, we've resolved those two issues, but the other ones that are still compelling and certainly have not been resolved is that we're still moving forward on what appears to be an infringement on private industry as it relates to imposing a living wage, particularly after the City of LA in years past, when they invented the original living wage ordinance, said that they would not connect it to business. We still do not have that nexus study that reflects why those businesses were identified as a nexus to the airport and why these businesses, and only those businesses, are going to be impacted by a living wage. And I think as we move forward, what I suspect is going to happen is that if they don't like the ordinance, we'll either have another referendum or a lawsuit. So we've just bought some time, but it doesn't appear we've resolved the concern. And I would have hoped that the studies that were mentioned in F and G in the ordinance, the new ordinance, would have been done prior to us going forward on a proposal, because we're now going to do something, or recommended that we do something, and then we're going to come back and ask that we study it. And it seems like we're going reversal, and we did a significant amount of study for the first living wage on a nexus study, but yet we're not doing it on this one. So it looks like all the study is going to be done afterwards. Madam President, I'd just like to ask one point of clarification. When we vote on this motion today, will we have the ability to separate the repeal and the recommended Part 2 and vote on them separately?
I would ask, since we've worked and with both the city attorney and Tom, signs from the mayor's office, again, what we're doing is rescinding and then asking the city attorney to draft the language that would come back. The final vote would be when we actually approve the ordinance. But I'll ask her, that's my understanding. And Ms. Hahn shook her head, so
Perhaps it would be cleanest, Mr. Parks and Madam President, if council took two separate votes, one to repeal and one to instruct.
Well, I will ask the makers of the motion, Ms. Hahn and Mr. Rosendahl, to consider that as well. Hear from Mr. Garcetti, and then we'll come back to that, Mr. Parks, if that's okay with you. Okay. Mr. Garcetti.
Thank you very much, Madam President. And thank you, everybody, for part of what was many late nights, many early mornings, a lot of weekends, and ultimately something which everybody was at the table, which I think represents the best of what Los Angeles is about, and returns to what government plays its best role in, which is facilitating and saying, how do we turn something which is a problem, poverty in our city, lack of business development along a corridor, and make it into something that's a mutually agreeable win-win solution. And, you know, we got away from that at one point because we reached out for a long time to the hotels on the corridor who now have been a part of this discussion. And part of the answer to my colleagues who asked the question about what the hotels think, they're not a singular entity any more than this body thinks with one mind, any more than Los Angeles thinks with one mind. But the fact that the Chamber of Commerce was standing with us today, not only the executive director but the chair of the Chamber of Commerce, is extremely significant. What it says is the business community understands the importance of this. And remember, colleagues, we passed 3 ordinances. 2 of them weren't even challenged, and in our discussions with hotels afterwards, they said, these are okay. We can work with these, and we understand how these do something good. In our conversations privately, too, on the 3rd one, they said, we understand we need to help these workers and do better. That was something they stated time and time again. And for that, that is a huge victory for what we pushed as an issue. What Ms. Hahn and Mr. Rosendahl did, what Mr. Huizar and Mr. Reyes did, what all of us who have been a part of this have done, along with the mayor who has been such a strong ally from the beginning, really pushed people to recognize that poverty is a problem for all of us, and for employers, it is too. We're not telling employers, though, that they have to solve it all by themselves. We're saying this is where government can help and actually do something that helps bring up an entire neighborhood. So I want to talk about a couple of those things and then address a couple of things Mr. Smith said on the record. Well, why don't I start with that? In terms of whether this is substantively different, I want to make 2 points. One is which we have strong opinions, and I believe that charter cities have a different threshold, that theoretically, even though that isn't the case here, that we and our charter is neutral on this, doesn't prohibit us, can actually pass the exact same thing right after we rescind something. That's not the case here. But I do want people out there to know that that prohibition is there's a different nuance in the law for charter cities, and we are a charter city. Second point, in terms of substantively different, you look at on number 2, in terms of what we're directing, A through H, 6 of these 8 things are totally different, not just substantively different. They're new. They're absolutely new. And so before we had something that was just about wages in the ordinance. But this has never been, for us, I think, just about wages. This is about lifting up an area, but when we were forced into that corner, now working closely with the business community, 6 out of 8 things are brand new. Those 6 things. Creating an airport hospitality enhancement zone. That's not a study. That is a huge, significant undertaking that will require our bureaucracies, our policy to march in a direction which today doesn't exist. Second, that the living wage be phased in in a different way than before. That is a substantive change that was not part of an earlier different ordinance. Commits the city then, when we look at what this zone will do, workforce education programs, the businesses get that if they have a workforce that gets ESL classes, that gets training in culinary and hospitality skills, that they won't have the turnover, that it helps the workers, it's a great thing for the workers, and we're going to find workforce development monies that doesn't come out of our general fund, working together with the community college district to get us to a place where we can see a better, more stable industry that helps the workers as well. Fourth, creates and defines new procedural and substantive requirements for future city council consideration. That is what the business community asked us to do, and we were willing to do that. That is a big change. It wasn't just, oh, we intend this to be here, but nothing else. It actually drills down into that and says specifically on the record in an ordinance form that will be right there in this area. Fifth, it mandates a one-year study and evaluation. That's not an abstract evaluation. That is a very specific thing looking at the effect that the living wage has on the industry, on consumers and workers. And I believe it will show that a rising tide has lifted all boats. It is not only doing that for the workers, it's doing it for the businesses as well. And the great agreement that Mr. Rosendahl and many of us were helpful in getting with the 4-Point Sheraton in an informal way is evidence of that. And lastly, I know I'm a little over, but I just want to establish this for the record, if I may. I think it's very important to have that rebutted for the record. It mandates a study to be completed within 6 months, thank you very much, Mr. Cardenas, of passage after the ordinance of health insurance. This discussion has led the hotels to bring things to the table which aren't necessarily legal requirements from the city, but pooling their buying power on health insurance, things that will help us get to a place where we're all talking about our economy with one voice. So I want to thank everybody who's been a part of this. These negotiations were very difficult, but everybody was at the table, and this represents something that's written not by us, not by just the workers, not by just business, but everybody. And in doing that, it represents the best of LA, and it represents what we can do for our economy. Gracias a los trabajadores por su visión, por su testimonio, sus ideas. I want to thank the workers for their vision, their testimony, and their ideas that helped inform this. And I want to thank business for staying at the table, keeping their eye on the ball, and realizing this is a town where we don't have to decide between business and workers. We can do both. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Cardenas, followed by Ms. Hahn, and then I think public hearing after that.
Thank you very much. I'll make it short since I informally yielded some of my time to my colleague, Council President Garcetti. I just want to remind everybody what we're talking about at the core here. We're talking about working poor in the United States of America, working poor in Los Angeles, working poor in one of the most prosperous economic places on earth. We have working poor. That's what we're talking about. Secondly, we're talking about a living wage, and we're talking about potentially access to health care for workers and children. We're not talking about helping people who may be sitting on a couch receiving a check to do nothing. We're talking about people who are working hard, full-time, to try to feed their family. We're trying to find a balance between business and working poor families. That's what we're trying to do here. So I just wanted to be brief and say that's at the core of what I'm focusing on. This may be an imperfect motion. It's an imperfect world, but I think we are doing the right thing here. We are going in the right direction, and I just wanted to say thank you to Councilmember Hahn and Rosendahl for spearheading this, and I want to say thank you for the community for standing up and asking us that we stand with you to try to make it a better place, a better working place, a better Los Angeles for all of you. So I just want to say thank you very much. Gracias.
Ms. Hahn, you want to speak, and then we'll go to
again, thank you. And I just wanted to say again, what we're doing here, colleagues, today, and I think my co-author agrees that we should bifurcate these two issues. So what we want to do today is rescind our original living wage ordinance, and then we'll take another vote. And I'm confident that we have enough votes to instruct the city attorney to come back with a new, substantially different ordinance that first and foremost protects the living wage for the workers, but certainly lays out an entire process for us to move forward to make sure that the entire corridor is lifted up together. And colleagues, we're doing this, and I'm doing this, because I believe that a campaign in May would have been divisive, it would have been ugly, and I think it would have maligned these workers in a way that they do not deserve to be maligned in public. And so I am doing this because I don't think a campaign would be healthy for them, for us, for the city, and this is a way to avoid that and yet give them the dignity and respect that they deserve. And again, I want to thank the workers for hanging in there with us all these months, and to remind you that 2 polls came out and showed that the majority of voters of Los Angeles are on your side on this one, and they also admire you, respect you, and believe that you deserve a living wage.
Thank you, Ms. Hahn. Thank you. I'd like to call up the following speakers. Maria Elena Durazo, Noel Weiss, Mort Allen, Maria Luisa Arolas, and Greg Good. Those are the order.
Okay.
Thank you.
I think it's still good morning, and for those city council members who are here, thank you. I want to thank all the city council members, from the president to Wendy Gruhl, to council members Hahn and Rosendahl, and the mayor, and all of you who voted to support a living wage for the workers in those hotels. We have to be creative about the way that we're going to address the extraordinary, growing, sad situation of poverty in the city, in the county, and in the nation. And I am so grateful that the majority of this city council see that we have to take steps in the right direction to deal with poverty. That's what it's all about. It's not enough to say, get a job. What about a job that pays you something that you could support your family with? That's what this is about. It's about Maria Luisa Avalos. Look at her and talk to her and ask her if her life and the lives of her 4 children would not be better if she had a living wage. And I'm glad, and I applaud also the chamber for coming to the table, for putting reasonable issues on the table, and for debating them, and for reaching an agreement and an understanding of what we should have in the city of LA, which is a partnership. I urge others who have not seen the light to please reconsider where you're at, what you're saying, and let's strengthen the city's position to take this forward. And I also urge, lastly, I urge you all to make sure this is a quick turnaround and not something that drags on, and it's with that understanding that we're supportive of the motions. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Ms. Avalos.
Buenas tardes a todos.
Good afternoon.
Me llamo María Luisa Ábalos, trabajo por el Hilton.
I work at the Hilton Hotel.
Por 6 años.
For 6 years.
Yo fui una persona de las que ayunó.
I was one of the people who fasted.
Por el sueldo digno.
For a living wage.
Que esperamos que vamos a ganar.
And we hope that we will approve this and go forward.
Tengo 4 hijos.
I have 4 children.
Los dos más grandes no pudieron ir a la universidad.
My 2 older could not go to college.
Pero los chiquitas sí quiero que vayan ellas a la universidad y quiero seguir luchando.
And I'm going to do all that I can to make sure that my 2 younger children do go to college.
Y les damos las gracias a todos los concejales y a Villarraigosa, al alcalde, y a todos los que nos han apoyado, los políticos, y a toda la ciudad de Los Ángeles, de parte de todos mis compañeros de trabajo.
And I want to thank everyone here in the City Council, Mayor Villaraigosa, and everyone across the city who supports us.
Y ya ganamos, pero no es el final, queremos seguir luchando. Y yo le digo a mis todos compañeros que sigan luchando, y sí se puede.
And that we're going to keep on organizing for what we deserve. Thank you.
Gracias.
Thank you. Mort Allen, followed by Noel Weiss.
Hi, I want to correct Tony Cardenas. It's not about the poor, it's about the rich getting richer. And I think that the problem with this is, I think it should be expanded to the harbor and to Universal. Maybe you read the paper this morning. The Universal GE sold it 4 years ago for $50 million. It sold yesterday. It closed yesterday at $122 million. They said they got the price of $72 million profit because they lowered costs and raised room rates. Now, we had an experience last night. A friend of mine is running for the school board. We had a fundraiser last night there. We had to pay double for the hors d'oeuvres. They doubled the price of it. Afterwards, we said, can we have some boxes to take them home? And they said, no, you're not allowed to take food out of the hotel. I went back in the kitchen. I took a pile of boxes, and everybody from Wendy on down, we all took the food home. And they were upset. They said, you can't do it. Now, I think that these hotels are all selling. It's in the paper today because they've lowered their expenses. And, I mean, I'm not really Mr. Big Time Union, but I'm going to tell you something. In my day and age, when I travel, I leave a tip for the maids every day in the rooms, the workers. I don't think people do that anymore. And I think with the rates they're getting, where these rooms are $300 a night now, this is a ridiculous discussion. It should be in every hotel. And the only thing that I say is unions are for adults, and for the union people, please stay out of the school board races. Thanks.
Thank you. Noel Weiss.
Council members, this kind of reminds me of John F. Kennedy's old saying, victory has 1,000 fathers, defeat is an orphan. But I think there's one person basically who made this happen, that's Janice Hahn. And as far as an act of legislative craftsmanship, I don't think any other city in the nation with this kind of business opposition has generated this kind of a result. And I think just as an example of political skill and craftsmanship, it is a Picasso painting, and I think it should go acknowledged, and I think that Janice basically hung tough. She has core principles, and I think these workers have every confidence to know that when it comes time to these negotiations that she is going to hang tough and that she is going to produce for them, and I think it's a tribute to the one person who basically made this happen, Janice Hahn. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Greg Good, and I do see a number of people. Are they all with you? Because I don't have any other cards, so they're all supporting you?
Yes.
That okay? Thanks.
Hi, my name is Greg Good. I'm with the West Los Angeles Democratic Club, and first we want to, which by the way represents thousands of members and associates on the West Side, including many communities around LAX. First, we want to congratulate our council member, Bill Rosendahl, Janice Hahn, Eric Garcetti, for their relentless leadership in pushing this forward and fighting for the workers' rights of the Century Corridor. We also want to congratulate and thank Councilmember Ed Reyes and Councilmember Huizar, who I sat on the bus with handcuffs on September 28th. That was fun. We talked about the Dodgers. And I want to congratulate the council in general for what has amounted to national leadership in addressing the inequities of our society. The West Los Angeles Democratic Club and voters on the West Side have from the beginning supported the workers on the Century Corridor, and we've also supported the businesses on the Century Corridor. Many of our members are business people on the West Side, and they're impacted by this. We support the goals of both, and we agree with the notion that a win-win is possible and in fact preferable. This agreement, hopefully, we believe, seems to meet both of those goals, and we're excited about that. We're excited about the economic overlay zone. We're excited about the living wage. However, we also recognize, as I'm sure the council does, that diligence and doggedness in implementation is an absolute necessity. And just as we congratulate this council, and we congratulate the mayor, and we congratulate the business community on their leadership and on this victory, we count on your leadership. We count on your ferociousness in making sure that the spirit and the reality of that original ordinance is reflected in the ultimate ordinance, and that by extension, the city of Los Angeles becomes a model of justice as opposed to a model of inequity. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, and thank you for those that behind you. We're going to go out to the San Fernando Valley. Dr. Weissman. Thank you, Dr. Weissman.
Very much, Madam Chairman. I'm going to speak in 3 different languages, 2 in which I'm not fluent, and so I apologize to those who are fluent in these languages. But in the idea of ecumenical, or at least broad spread comments, Mr. Smith brought the issue up as to what is said on Passover Seder. As the grandfather now, the question is asked of me, and I've said this before this council before, by the youngest member of our family, Ma nishtana halayla hazeh. Why is this night different from all other nights? I'm going to paraphrase that for this morning, which is almost afternoon now. Ma nishta boker halayla haboker. Why is this morning different? In Espanol, ¿por qué esta noche diferente que todas las otras noches? Again, apologies for my poor Spanish. Why is this night different? Porque esta mañana diferente que todas las otras mañanas. The difference is we're now talking about a core issue. I would differ with those who have already said that this should not be put before the total population. I would differ before all of you because this has not come before the neighborhood councils. And this is a matter of such great importance that your consideration should include the neighborhood councils who represent everyone who lives, works, and owns property in the city of Los Angeles. Now, that means everyone who works and owns property. Works and owns property. This is a matter for all of us. Mr. Garcetti, you talked about raising all boats. Well, we're going to raise all boats when we no longer have $50,000 as the poverty, 100 to 200,000 as the middle class, which is vanishing.
Thank you very much, Mr. Weissman. Thank you very, very much. Colleagues, the item is now before us. The makers of the motion have agreed to separate the 2 motions before the 2 items within the motion. So, Mr. Clerk, if you could instruct us on which one will go first.
Yes, Madam President. Council's first vote would be to adopt the ordinance which would repeal ordinance number 178082, which required LAX area hotels to pay certain hotel service workers a living wage.
So the first vote will be on the repeal. Madam Clerk, open the roll, close the roll, tabulate the votes.
14 ayes.
Okay. Next item on that.
The second vote would be to request the city attorney to prepare an ordinance which includes the provisions as contained in the Hahn-Rosendahl motion, and those are A through H.
Okay. Thank you. Madam Clerk, if you could open the roll on that item, close the roll, tabulate the votes.
12 ayes, 2 noes.
Thank you. That matter passes, and we'll hear it back in a week. Thank you very much. Congratulations to all. Mr. Clerk, next item.
Item 12 was called special by Councilmember Garcetti.
Mr. Garcetti.
Thank you very much, Madam President. Thank you, Mr. Huizar, for lending me your microphone here. Colleagues, kind of just jumping off of the last thing that we did, part of the evidence of what this city's power is to be a pro-business environment and something that helps improve our economy for both the workers and those businesses that are here. Today we're voting on transferring funds for our EIR for the Los Angeles State Enterprise Zone. I want to thank the Hollywood Chamber of Commerce, the Governor's Office, and our legislators who helped bring an enterprise zone to the heart of Hollywood. I know Mr. Green spoke before about the changes that are happening on Hollywood Boulevard. Appreciate the kind comments. We have already passed earlier in the agenda more cameras in Hollywood for public safety, which has made it a pro-business environment. There's another item on the Cinerama Dome parking, which has been a great engine. Parking isn't an end unto itself, but it helps support businesses and helps support housing. And the ArcLight Cinema has been a great success of a public-private partnership. And then this one, basically the Enterprise Zone will reward businesses that stay in Hollywood. It also applies to other parts of the city. I know Ms. Perry's district, by the Goodyear track, and some other parts of LA. But what it says is if you hire locally, you get tax breaks. Paramount Pictures, the largest employer in my district, said, we love that we have this now in Hollywood because it means we can hire locally. That means the kids that are going to school in East Hollywood and the southern edges of Hollywood can go work in that studio that they've always driven by or walked by or seen and never imagined that they could be a part of. When we see the entertainment industry now finally, for the first time, a top 10 industry in the city, that means that throughout Hollywood with the hospitals, the entertainment companies, etc., we can help those businesses improve their bottom line while they also hire locally. Any of the loans they take out to expand also are done at a lower rate to ensure that this really is a great enterprise zone. So I want to thank everybody, especially the work Billy Greer at the governor's office was critical in helping us work through this. Our community development department, which was great with this as well. Our partners in Hollywood, Mr. Weiss and Mr. Labange. And we're open for business in Hollywood. And it's cheaper than ever, and you can hire locally. So come on down, and we'll help you with your business. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Garcetti. That item is now before us.
I just wanted to tag in behind that and the effort that Mr. Garcetti has done. When you talk about employment, trying to put it all together in Hollywood, he's been doing it. I know he has the core of the district, but in the neighborhoods around, it is making a difference. So I appreciate all your leadership on this, Mr. Garcetti. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Labange. Madam Clerk, open the roll, close the roll, tabulate the votes.
14 ayes.
That item's been approved. Next item.
Madam President, the amendments on 23 and 24 have now been circulated. Do you wish to take those up?
Please, 23 and 24. Yes, Mr.
Yes,
Reyes.
Madam President, while we're doing that, could we move forthwith on 26 and 27? Forthwith?
Forthwith on
Yes.
26 and 27, we shall do that. On 23 and 24, we do have cards. Are the public hearing required, or the council member would have to request?
Public hearing was held in committee.
Okay. So now 23 and 24 are before us, and the motions have not? Amending motions have been circulated, and no request for public hearing. So Madam Clerk, open the roll, close the roll, tabulate the votes.
14 ayes.
Those items have been approved. Next item.
Item 31 was called special for cards from the public.
Thank you. We have three cards. Detective McClanahan, Andrea Davis, and Elizabeth Wright. Do we have any of those speakers here on this item? Again, Detective McClanahan, Andrea Davis, and Elizabeth Wright. If not, Madam Clerk, open the roll on that item, close the roll, tabulate the votes.
13 ayes.
Thank you. That item's been approved. Next item.
Item 34 called special for cards from the public.
Ms. Sylvia Lynn Hawkins.
Gracias, Senorita. Again, my name is Ms. Hawkins. As we improve transportation in Los Angeles, California, to help our elderly people live longer lives with assistance from United States of America government, here are some reasons that can help them to become or to be independent and able not to become gravely disabled as we begin a new job position. We are in need, City Hall of Los Angeles workers, for over 5,000 job positions for workers to drive them to the grocery store weekly, helping them with transportation from the workers.
This is no way in relation to a street vacation, what she's talking about.
Okay, thank you. I will speak on this issue concerning hiring them and how much they will get paid.
Thank you. Yeah, that was the earlier issue.
Concerning a public comment.
Right. Thank you for those comments earlier.
Okay, tomorrow.
Okay?
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. That closes our public comment on this one. Let's open the roll, close the roll, and tabulate the vote.
12 ayes.
That is approved. Next item.
Item 41 was called special for cards from the public.
Okay, item 41 is now before us, and we have a number of cards on this one. Laura Brill is our first speaker, and then Jerome Cohen, and then Mort Allen. Welcome.
Good morning, Mr. President, members of the council. Laura Brill, Irela Manella, representing Clear Channel Outdoor and CBS Outdoor. There are 3 reasons why you should not approve the motion that's before you today. There are confidentiality provisions that are in the settlement agreement between my clients and the city.
If you move it actually straight onto you. It doesn't have to be close, but we pick it up, and we'll give you your seconds back. Go ahead.
Thanks. The confidentiality provisions do not interfere with the public interest. There are important commercial reasons to protect the information of compilations, and the provisions are supported by the law. On the first point, the provisions do not take away from the public anything that is available today. Any member of the public will be able to request information regarding any particular sign in the city, even if the agreement goes forward. Also, the provision affects only compilations of data. It would be unfeasible for the city to create these compilations today in the absence of cooperation from the sign companies. On the second point, the sign companies treat their compilations of their sign inventory data as proprietary and confidential. It's got the status in terms of their own commercial value of a customer list, and it's really within the heart of what trade secret protection is about. We've heard a lot today about being pro-business, and allowing companies to protect confidential customer lists or location lists is really part of that, and you shouldn't give competitors who have not settled with the city an unfair advantage on that. Finally, the provision is supported by law. The city and state public records laws recognize an exception for trade secrets. The state trade secret law recognizes that compilations can be trade secrets, and also case law holds that compilations of otherwise public information should be protected because of the commercial value and confidential nature of those compilations. And finally, the agreement states that the city will take no position on this issue.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
All right, our next speaker is Jerome Cohen.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. I'm a constituent, and I'm an attorney and a former assistant city attorney, state attorney, and federal attorney, law clerk to a federal judge. I've been asked on a pro bono basis to represent the Coalition to Ban Billboard Blight. There is an important public interest. You've just heard that there are commercial interests to be protected. The matter is not a two-party matter. It's not these compilers and protecting their compilations against competitors. There's a public interest in a clean and clear environment. There's a public safety interest. The council should recognize that this controversy, billboard regulation, is a national controversy. City after city has found it hasn't the resources to withstand a well-financed, determined industry. And if not the City Council of Los Angeles, what city council? We ask that the City Council examine with special scrutiny these claims of confidentiality and commercial interest against the public interest in a clean, clear environment, and decide on the settlement on that basis. We recognize that the settlement of every litigation involves costs and benefits. Please, council members, ask yourselves whether the city has given up too much in cost for the benefits obtained. Thank you.
Thank you. Our last speaker will be Mort Allen. Thank you. Our last speaker will be Mort Allen.
I want to speak as a member of an inactive but not disbanded committee that this council set up in 1999, which was the Ad Hoc Billboard and Sign Task Force. And unfortunately, we haven't been meeting or anything, but you've got a major problem here, and you've got 8,000 property owners about ready to sue the city because in the settlement and in the agreements, you state that the landowner cannot change the vendor. They cannot switch from one company to another. They're stuck with the company. Based on that, rents have been put in half. I happen to have a billboard in Studio City on my office that they're renting for $18,000 a month. I get $1,800 a month. Another vendor, which is new in town, J.C. Decaux, of which George Maniak is the new president of, is offered me $7,000 a month, but I can't change vendors because the city won't allow it. So I think that the reason they don't want you to know the list because they're just getting away with murder. Now, you can get the Clear Channel list because that's actively for sale with Goldman Sachs, and the sales rate to close, and it's public record, every billboard they have, so that's all you do to get their list. CBS was also sold recently when Infinity sold to Viacom, and that's public record. Regency will give you their list, and Van Wagner will give you their list, so it really shouldn't be a problem to get the list. But what's more important is on your settlement, you're legalizing every board for the last 50 years, and there's boards falling off buildings. Sherman Oaks, about 3 or 4 weeks ago, we had a huge board fall off the building on McGee Self-Storage. And if you go down, especially in your district, Eric, you have a lot of old billboards on rooftops that are going to fall down, and you're legalizing everything automatically. So I really think you need to readdress this, and the main thing is you got to add in there that a landowner has the right to change vendors. Okay?
Thank you, Mr. Allen. We'll start with Mr. Weiss.
Thank you, Mr. President, and if our friends from the City Attorney's Office could come forward. Colleagues, here's what we're discussing today. Here is, if I could have the timer adjusted. Here is why Ms. Gruhl and I put this motion in. All of you are aware that over the past year or two or so, the Council has voted to approve recommendations from the City Attorney's Office to enter into settlement agreements with certain billboard companies. There's a long backstory to those negotiations and those settlement agreements. Let's face it, those were hold-your-nose settlement agreements that many of us supported on the advice of our council because we wanted the fee and inspection program to go forward, and we did not want to see another several years of litigation holding up the implementation of those of that important program. Nonetheless, it was always my intent as the person who drafted this ordinance that the information provided by the billboard companies to the city would necessarily and obviously be public information. It's come to my attention that there is now a filing in court that I have a copy of, a stipulation between the City Attorney's Office and the billboard companies with respect to the issue of should the lists provided by the billboard companies to the city be held as confidential proprietary information. The City Attorney's Office has not taken a position on this issue of whether the list should be held as confidential trade secrets. So you have not agreed with the billboard companies. I believe today the council should vote to take a position that it would be the position of the city that these lists should not be held as secret. I mean, how can we with a straight face say to the public that the billboards in this city ought to be treated as secret? As my colleagues were just pointing out a few moments ago, the names of the billboard companies are on each of the signs. The billboards are openly and notoriously held out to the public in the city for all to see. If the city went out and compiled a list of the billboards in the city, that would surely be public information. So it defies logic why the city should in any way be complicit in making that information a secret. The second concern I have has to do with something that was stipulated to by the City Attorney's Office. The City Attorney's Office stipulated with the billboard companies that when Public Records Act requests are filed by members of the public, the billboard companies will be given notification of the filing of those requests. That concerns me because in my view, that could act to chill members of the public who are seeking public information from their government. I'm not aware of any other time when a private commercial interest is given notification because of the filing of a Public Records Act request by a member of the public. So I want to give you folks at the City Attorney's Office the opportunity to tell us your perspective on these issues.
Thank you, Councilman. Peter Gutierrez, Assistant City Attorney. We share the same concerns that I think you do and that this council does with respect to openness and the public availability of records. So let me just clarify for the record that the settlement agreement does not provide that all of the information provided to the city by the billboard companies will be kept secret and is not subject to disclosure under the Public Records Act. Under this settlement agreement, the billboard companies will be providing the city with a whole host of information, including documents that they have in their possession that we may not necessarily have in our possession. All of those documents that are submitted to the city as part of this process become public records by virtue of their, coming into our hands and being part of our files and being kept in the ordinary course of business. What is at issue here is simply what amounts to a customer list, and whether or not the list or the information provided by Clear Channel can be accessible with the punch of a button, let's say, with a subject query under Clear Channel. So what's at issue and what the court, and quite frankly what is a legal issue, is whether or not that customer list, if you will, is protected from disclosure under the Public Records Act. We think that's a legal issue that it is appropriate for the court to decide, but I want to make it absolutely clear that our office does and is very supportive of publicly available, the public availability of information, and the documentation that is going to be submitted to us by the billboard companies is going to be publicly available.
Okay, I have in my hands a revised proposed stipulated judgment, stipulation between the parties, signed by Ms. Brill, Mr. Blau, and Mr. Gutierrez, and dated January 26. You're familiar with this document, correct?
We have it in front of us.
Okay. I want to read to you on page 7 of this document, little Roman numeral 4 says, "The city takes no position on whether such materials are confidential or trade secrets, but has agreed to comply with a finding of the court to that effect." So that was the position you took in this stipulation, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. All right. What I'm seeking to do today is to change that position so that the city will take a position in opposition to the billboard company's filing. You understand that, right?
I do understand that, but again, I want to make sure that the council understands that the information that they provide to us, the documentation that they provide on their sites, is going to be publicly available information.
Well, again, but not if the court rules otherwise.
I think the court is going to rule as to whether or not what amounts to a customer list is going to be protected or not protected. I mean, if they provide us with a copy of a building permit for a particular location, that's going to be available. If a member of the public wants to come into the Office of Building and Safety, once we have received all this information and find out or access documents for example, in your district, Councilman, if somebody comes in and says, I want to look at all of the documentation that you have with respect to signs in the 5th District, someone will be able to get that information. It will be publicly available.
With all due respect, though, Section 3A of the stipulation refers to copies of building permits. If a building permit's not available, address of structure, year the structure was erected, basis for the contention that it was legal, the type of structure, and what the billboard companies say in their portion of the stip is that they believe that the compilation of data disclosing the location of all or substantially all of their sign structures is confidential and proprietary. So the court could rule to keep that information confidential. You agree with me?
No, I don't. It's the compilation is what's confidential. In other words, it's the totality of the information which is given to us in one lump sum, so to speak. It's that compilation that's at issue, not the sum parts of the compilation itself.
And I want to make that compilation, that lump sum, available to the public. So I have a difference of opinion. I think that should be made available to the public. Let me go on to, because my time is running out, let me go on to another paragraph. I want to point, two more paragraphs I want to read to you.
Go ahead.
On page 7, little Roman numeral 6. Little Roman numeral 7. In the event that any person requests that the city provide it with all or a substantial portion of the permit information provided to the city by either Clear Channel or CBS pursuant to Section 3A, the city shall, at least 10 days before making such disclosure, provide Clear Channel or CBS, as the case may be, with written notice regarding the nature of the request for information. That is something the city did stipulate to. That concerns me, because what that says is that when a member of the public makes a Public Records Act request, the city will notify the billboard companies, who will then in turn presumably have a head start on litigating that Public Records Act request, and they'll know who made it. That potentially, I think, sets a bad precedent and could chill members of the public from making Public Records Act requests.
The important provision here is Steve Blau, Deputy City Attorney. The important provision is provision little 6. Says the city shall ensure that any publicly accessible database, including permit information described above, shall not permit members of the public to search for signs based upon Clear Channel or CBS's association with the signs. That is really the guts of the agreement. It is a procedural mechanism that that requires the city, when setting up this computerized database, to exclude as a field the name of the owner of the sign. It prevents a member of the public from coming up to a public terminal, pressing in CBS and getting a map of where all of the signs are. It does not protect any of the information that the city has. All of the information that the city has, every last piece of paper with respect to every piece of sign, every sign can be obtained. If a member of the public has a complaint about a sign and has an address, they can go up, plug into the computer the address, they can get the owner of the sign and every piece of paper the city has. The only thing they can't do under this agreement is go up to a computerized terminal and plug in CBS or Clear Channel and get a map of where all their signs are located.
And with all due respect, the stipulation that the City Attorney's Office entered into therefore protects CBS and Clear Channel in that regard. I do not believe it is appropriate for us to protect CBS or Clear Channel. I want to protect the public and make all of this information available to the public. I do not want to put roadblocks in the way of the public's ability to search. I'm telling you as a policymaker. And I do not believe that there was authorization, express authorization to take this position in the settlement agreement. That's why Ms. Gruhl and I made the motion we have today.
Ms. Gruhl.
Thank you. Segue into asking questions. You just said it's only the compilation, okay? Which begs the question, why? I mean, if you can get the information, but you have to be, you have to look, you have to ask for each of the lists and different things, why would we agree? Why? I don't understand what the reason is. I understand from the billboard company's position, but from a city's perspective, I'd like to know, for example, if I'm a constituent and I have a billboard company and that particular, whatever the billboard company is, and there's graffiti on that billboard, it is near a school and has, which we've had instances where most of the billboard companies we have approached have removed inappropriate billboard voluntarily, where they were advertising for something that I thought was not appropriate near a school. What if we wanted to know that, is this happening all across the city of Los Angeles, and be able to find that? And I guess my question is as well, a customer list. I mean, we're talking about the sites, and I know, and I guess same kind of with all due respect, the City Council, when we adopted the agreement, much to our chagrin and painfully and not, sure that we wanted to even do that, because if we collected that information at that time, we wouldn't be having this discussion at all if we collected that information and charged the fee that we had initially proposed to do. But that stipulation did not come to the City Council to say it's okay to agree to this as a council. So my question, and then I have another one, which is, why would we agree to that, excluding that information, when you can get it another way? Why would we make it difficult when it is public information?
Well, the stipulation is to simply let the court decide whether or not what amounts to a customer list is or is not a publicly available information. What you spoke to in terms of the public being able to access information with respect to a particular site, a particular sign, the particular sign owner for that site, I mean, that information is going to be publicly available. It's the totality of the information that is what is the court will decide is or isn't protected. So that's really a legal issue that we think the court should decide.
Why would we give away the right in a stipulation to take a position on that, I guess is my question. Because if the information is available, and again, you'd have to ask separately, I want a list of the building permits, I want a list of the signs, you know, but as an elected official, you know, I wouldn't want to, if I'm going to another city, have to go through all of that. It's public information. And so I think the question is, why would we agree to that when, to me on the face, it's something we shouldn't agree to, because that information is public information.
Yeah, and again, you know, we've agreed to let the court decide the issue, and as part of our, you know, agreement with Clear Channel, we've not taken a position, but again, that's what the court's going to decide. I want to get back to that.
Why would we take the position of that we don't have an opinion on this, when in fact, I don't know if the rest of the council does have an opinion that we think it should be public, because whatever the court decides, I mean, in some instances, we want to go to the court and argue our position, which says we want this to be public information. We don't want our hands tied in that, because I think we all think the information should just be public.
I think the bottom line is that the information that is being provided to us, with the exception of, like I said, what amounts to the customer list, is going to be publicly available. And so, I think our concern and our primary consideration is to, number one, get that information into our hands so that building and safety can do their job in terms of the inspections. And we know that information that's provided to us is going to be publicly available, with the exception of the compilation. So in that respect, it does serve the public's interest to move this process forward, to get the information, and and to have that information publicly available. I don't think that the information that you're talking about that someone needs to access in order to report a sign, in order to take whatever steps that you need to take as a public official, that information is going to be available.
Okay, so if that, and maybe, and I have not heard a customer list. What's different, what's a definition of a customer list and a compilation that is different than what information is accessible right now that we're requiring them to provide to us and would be under the public information? I mean, what's a customer list? I mean, to me,
I think what will happen is that you would not simply be able to go to a terminal somewhere and do a query, Clear Channel, and have somebody spit out or have the database spit out every Clear Channel location on a map for you. I think that's the essence.
Why would we be why, if you could call in and have a Freedom of Information Act and said, please send me the list. I'm requesting you to send me a list of all of the Clear Channel. What you're saying to me is that you would be required to provide to someone who asks for it.
Actually, it's not certain that we would be required to do that. We would be prohibited from doing that if it was a trade secret. And our policy is that when information is requested from third parties or real parties in interest, our often notifies those parties that this information has been requested, so that the courts can make that determination and balance the interest between the public's right to know and the private company's right to maintain the confidentiality of the information.
So it's about the informing. It's about determining I think maybe, and I'm not sure I agree with that, but what you're suggesting is, it's not that the information isn't there, it's about who's asking for it. And then if it is you go to a terminal and you are an anonymous person who may in fact want to take your trade secrets, that the company cannot go to court and say, stop me.
Well, first, the information isn't there yet. We don't have the information, nor have the databases been set up.
Okay.
So,
I really want to get down, I'm frustrated, because I'm getting down to really simple questions. I ask a question if I am a constituent or I am a council member, and I would like to know, every Vista, Clear Channel, whoever it is, I want to know every single billboard that they own, because I have a problem with graffiti, all these other things, and I want to know if it's just in my district, or it's in Jack Weiss's district, or Bill Rosenthal's district. Can I get that information?
not based on our current information. We don't have that.
No. When we've agreed to, when this stipulation and all of the agreements, I was under the impression that we would have that information in the city of Los Angeles. Once the billboard companies give us that information. Is that true?
I believe that the way it would be set up is, yes, you could ask Building and Safety to spit out all of the signs in the city on which there was graffiti or on which there were complaints. So you could get that information.
But what if there's been no complaints, but in fact there is graffiti in that location? I want to go find out if it's the same.
Yeah, I'm sorry, if you want to find out.
If I want to find out if in Jack Weiss's district, or, that someone hasn't complained that there's a graffiti on Wilshire and Westwood's billboard, but it happens to be X company's billboard, I will not be able to get that information unless there had been a complaint. Is that what you're saying?
No. Do you follow that?
No, I don't follow
I don't follow that. If you have an address for any billboard, you can get every piece of paper the city has on that billboard.
And I know my time is over, but I was a code maker. Do I get 6 minutes as well, or is
Under
it
our
just...
council rules, just the first speaker gets 6 minutes, even though if it's co or it's actually the committee chair, but it's always the first. But we'll come back to you.
I think that, though, this is Sharon Seedoff Cardenas, City Attorney's Office speaking. I think maybe that we're talking about two different things here.
Okay.
There is, the issue that's going to the court right now is the initial database that is being provided to us from the companies, for which that's the compilation, for which the city has done nothing to manipulate that database or anything. And they have taken the position that's a trade secret. We've said the court should decide that, because we're not going to take that position. Then there's the next issue is, once the city has completed the inspection program and has therefore created its own database using all of the information, how will that database be queried?
And that will not just be graffiti or whatever. That will be, they've gone and inspected every single one.
That'll be after they've inspected every one.
And how long
Building and
will that be?
Safety will create a database. That's the one that they're anticipating will take 3 years to create. Then after that time, although we don't know what the parameters are going to be that Building and Safety is going to use to build that database, if someone came into Building and Safety and asked for a list of all of Clear Channel's signs, then it's possible that they could get that, but we would alert Clear Channel that they asked for that, and then if they wanted to try and assert a privilege to that, we would allow them to do that, just like we allow any other, professional when it comes to plans or certain things that the city has in its database, that there's a possibility that there's a exception that attaches to. We alert them so that they can assert it, because we will not assert it for them.
I again would argue, I'm not a lawyer, and I'd argue in front of a court that it is not a trade secret, that these are visible, public, for the public to see in the city of Los Angeles. It's not like building plans. It's not telling them who's advertising on their billboards. It's just saying your billboard is on the corner of this street. And so I just feel very, very strongly about this, that it is not proprietary information and that the city should say, we don't believe it is proprietary information and it should be accessible to the public for a variety of reasons.
Thank you, Ms.
Sorry,
Will.
thank you for...
Mr. Labange, and then Mr. Rosendahl, and Mr. Weiss.
All right, Mr. Weiss, Ms. Gruhl, Mr. Weiss, thank you for bringing this to our attention here. A question I wanted to ask, are Department of Water and Power records public records? For...
I don't know about, I wouldn't think customer information is.
No,
but-
where electrical service is. Do we know, are you asking somebody there, or are you answering your phone?
I'm trying to turn it off.
All right, okay. I'm just saying, I mean, if the Department of Water and Power has a power system that runs a billboard on Hyperion Avenue, that's should be a public record, or should find out about that. I don't know what the big deal is on trying to find out where everything is. We don't have no accounting. We made a settlement without having an accounting. Is that correct, Mr. Weiss? In this settlement, we have no accounting to where all the boards are.
We made, part of the reason for this ordinance, if I have 1 second, was
Sure.
to require the billboard companies to give the city a list of all of their billboards.
Right.
So the city would have the list, and in my view, by definition, the public would have the list. What's happening here is the billboard companies are saying, we'll give you a list, city, of all of our billboards, as long as you don't share it with the public. That's what's before us today.
Right. Now, does that sound fair, Mr. City Attorney? Or Madam City Attorney?
Well, you know, again,
I mean, I think the arguments we had on the tape,
Right.
and your predecessor who was here sat there, and the whole argument that we had, I think about 4 or 5 years ago, was to get an inventory. We made an agreement to get an inventory. And that's what we don't have, an inventory. Right?
Right, and that's what we're trying to get. And again, let me be clear.
So you're going to give us an inventory?
Right, and we're not here to protect the billboard companies, so, I think, we're interested to know what direction the council wants to take, and we'll go from there.
And the question of whether it's fair is a balancing decision on the right of the billboard companies to protect their own information and the right of the public to know.
But also, let me ask you a question. In their marketing scheme, don't they put out a brochure that says, here's my billboard company, and you could have a billboard right on Century Boulevard, and allow the people going to the airport across from whatever restaurant or hotels there will see it. I'm sure they market their locations, so I don't know what the big trick is. I think public information is very important, because information is knowledge is power, and we should have the understanding that it's very important to get this information, so I support this. Thank you, Mr. Weiss. Thank you, Ms. Gruhl. And Ms. Hahn, thank you for what you do every day.
Thank you very much, Mr. Labange. Thank you for what you do, too. Mr. Rosendahl.
Thank you, Mr. President. Very interesting discussion here, colleagues. Okay, help me out. I'm not as bright as my colleagues on this one. My district is full of billboards, okay? It's probably got more billboards than anybody else. You all came to settlements with some of these groups before I even got elected to the council, and some of us have been sort of a blueprint for the further deals that you've made, and so we're all on this wave going forward. But explain to me why we would not want to know where these billboards are, especially when my constituents more than anything hate the billboards. We should at least have an understanding of what the dimension is, where they are. What's the downside of doing that? I'd like to hear from you.
Well, we are going to know all that. That's the purpose of us getting this information from the billboard companies.
So why would anybody be against
Precisely
this?
so. We're not. I mean, we are going to get all that information, and, it is all going to be publicly available.
Well, then what Mr. Weiss is saying is exactly the direction we're going to go. I mean, from the standpoint of you folks sitting here.
We're not here to fight you on,
You don't have
on
any
the
problem
direction
with
that
it in
you want
terms
to
of
go.
your settlements and all this other stuff. That's my real question.
Well, as to whether or not there would be an argument that Clear Channel could make that there's a breach of the settlement,
Yeah.
that the chips will fall where they may there.
You can
But,
deal
I'm
with
not here to argue with you about whether or not, information that they provide to us is going to be publicly available. Our interest is the same as yours, and that's public disclosure of the information. And we think that as currently set up, this settlement agreement does provide for information to be publicly available, and we do need to get all of the information about dimensions, location. All of that information is going to be publicly available. Again, we're not here to fight about whether or not there ought to be some secret cache of information somewhere. I mean, we're talking about, again, a compilation, what we're calling a compilation, which, a court will decide whether or not that's a trade secret.
So if
and I
I'm
think
not
Mr.
missing anything, then what Mr. Weiss is saying is exactly right, and we're going to go forward, and I'm going to obviously, for that, more transparency, more openness, more empowerment, more knowledge is always good, right?
Well,
Okay.
we're prepared
I understand
we're prepared to advise the court as to, where the council stands on this.
Great, thank you.
Mr. Reyes is next, and then Mr. Weiss. And colleagues, I think we're going to lose our quorum in about
Okay.
5 minutes.
Council President, I'll try to be as succinct as possible. Our attorneys, if we did a motion today that clarified what our position is based on the observations made by Councilman Weiss, and that we want disclosure of lists, if we did a motion with that language, how does that fit into your process so we can close this loop and make sure we're at a comfort zone that allows us to move forward, understanding our position?
We'll take that to the court and put that in front of the court.
So you're in the middle of the court process, we'll put the motion forward, we'll make that happen, and we can close this, and we can
Absolutely.
go home. Yes. So I'd like to do a motion. Councilman Weiss, you want to put the motion?
Is in the motion that Ms. Gruhl and I submitted. Precisely that the council take a formal position that the inventory lists are not proprietary and should be subject to the California Records Act. That is part and parcel of the motion that is before us today.
I highly encourage we take a vote so we can close this.
And I would just, if I just may augment that, because since I've made the motion, I've had the chance to review Little 6 and Little 7 on page 7. I would include in my motion that the city's stipulation to those provisions be stricken. And so with that, I close the debate.
Thank you, Mr. Weiss. All right, we have that motion before us. It's accepted as a friendly amendment. So we can vote on this together, I believe. If we can open the roll, close the roll, and tabulate the vote.
Ayes.
That is approved. Thank you. All right, next order of business.
Council has motions for posting and referral.
Those are posted and referred.
There's an excuse on the desk. Councilmember Smith requests to be excused to leave at 11 a.m. on February 23rd for city business that meets council policy.
All right, he's excused.
Desk is clear.
All right, any announcements, colleagues? Mr. Labange.
You going to do Black History Month? Over, and then I'll take it from you. Okay, thank you very much. Members, this weekend starts Black History Month, kicking off an event of crafts, food, and entertainment, jazz, reggae, and gospel groups on Saturday and Sunday, February 3rd and 4th, at the Los Angeles Zoo. So we would welcome everyone to come out and celebrate a beautiful weekend at the Los Angeles Zoo, but more importantly, celebrating Black History Month this year at the Los Angeles Zoo this weekend. Thank you very much, members, and thank you, Mr. Parks,
very much.
for
Mr.
your
Parks?
assistance.
Yeah. Yes, I'd just like to announce that the next community meeting of the LA City Council Budget and Finance Committee will be February the 12th at the Epic Center, and Council Districts 8, 9, and 15 will have constituents there. Also, that for high school juniors, there is an advertisement from the Edison Company that they're providing free engineering camp with the University of Houston during the summer months, and the contact number is 713-743-4226. And then I mentioned yesterday, but wanted to mention again as part of Black History Month, we'll be bringing forth the motion on a resolution to create a Tom Bradley Heritage Stamp on council meeting date Tuesday, February 6th at 10 o'clock. And then also Exposition Construction Authority will be having its update meeting with the community on Wednesday, February 7th at the USC Galen Center. And also the next two meetings for the MTA that deals with changes. There's over 50 changes in the bus schedule. The next two meetings will be one in the San Fernando Valley, February 7th at the Marvin Browdy Center at 6:30. Also at Gateway City Sector, the gas company on 9240 Firestone and Downey, and that's at 5 p.m. And then February 9th at 9:30 a.m. at the Carson Community Center, which is the South Bay, And the final one is that we've all participated in this, but the free cash for college is Saturday, February 10th from 9 to 2 o'clock. And the contact number, there's over 25 schools involved in it where kids can come out and get information about free cash for college. You call 888-CAL-CA-grant and for that information.
Thank you. Other announcements? Does anybody have adjourning motions today? If I can ask everybody please to rise for adjourning motions. Mr. Labange.
Thank you, members. One of the great leaders of the Los Feliz community, Charlotte DeArmond, passed away early this morning. She was wonderfully involved in many of the projects to protect and preserve the community of Los Feliz. She lived to be 85 years old. I ask we adjourn in memory of Charlotte DeArmond.
Thank you. Mr. Parks?
Thank you, Mr. President. I have 3 adjourning motions today. First one is Eugene Walker, who was born in September 1925 in Marshtown, Tennessee. He moved to Los Angeles, attended the UCLA from 43 to 46, and then later moved to Washington, D.C., and attended Howard University. After graduating with his medical degree, he then went to Minnesota, where he completed his residency and internship at the University of Minnesota. He then came to Los Angeles as part of the King Drew Medical Center, also Chief of Intern Medicine for the Queen of Angels and St. Vincent Hospitals. He was committed to pursuit of lifelong learning, and he passed away on January the 20th. His memorial services this Friday, February the 2nd, 1 p.m. to 4 p.m. at the Olympic Collection on 11301 Olympic Boulevard. Also, I'd like to adjourn in memory of Rita Marie Klopner, born in 1949 in Chicago. She moved to California, resided in the Compton area. She was enrolled in St. Albert Catholic Elementary School, and in 1963 also attended Regina Chaley High School. She graduated from University of Cal State at Fullerton with her bachelor's degree. She owned her own business, but she was most known for that she was a community activist where she was as well known amongst the police and sheriff program as well as the at-risk children. She was known as, or affectionately as, Miss Rita, as she involved herself with drug counseling and alcohol counseling. She had also a passion for animals. She also further served the community as a member of the board of directors for the Center for the Educational Achievement. She was a faithful member during the year 2000 to 2004. The nonprofit organization provided educational program for more than 15,000 students. Funeral services are currently pending. The final one is Roger Ray Hamilton. He was born in 1950 in Clinton, Oklahoma. Proud parents, Roger Sr. And Glenola Hamilton. He was the second child of 3. He received his primary education in Oklahoma public school system, and he moved to Los Angeles, where he graduated in his senior year from Jefferson High School. After high school, he attended Bryman's College in the field of nursing. He was employed at R. Stanford Preschool in Los Angeles as a maintenance engineer, later became self-employed as a housekeeper and in the home care worker for over 25 years. Funeral service is scheduled for Friday, February 2nd at 11 a.m. at the Bryant Temple AME Church.
Thank you. Other adjourning motions, colleagues? Mr. Zine.
Request we adjourn in memory of James McDonald, passed away January 30th in Boston, Massachusetts. Mr. James McDonald was born June 30th, 1925, in Dublin, Ireland. Served in the Royal Air Force during World War II. James McDonald arrived in the United States in 1958. He is the father of Los Angeles Police Department First Assistant Chief Jim McDonald. James was a great man, will be greatly missed by his family and friends, and the services will be out of state. Survived by his wife, Eileen, son Stephen and Jim, daughter Eileen, grandchildren Kelly, Megan, and Matthew. May James McDonald rest in peace.
Thank you, all members. Mr. Clerk, please call the roll. Thank you. We'll next be in session on Friday, and to remind everybody, we'll be in Van Nuys City Hall at 10 a.m. on Friday. That's February the 2nd. We look forward to seeing you there. Have a great afternoon, and this meeting of the Los Angeles City Council is adjourned.